We see in front of us a short, thin guy with dark hair who was an ordinary college student and thought that he could live his happy life with his girlfriend. His name is Edward. His dreams were shattered one day when the end of the world came. A virus appeared that began to turn people into zombies. A terrible disease came from nowhere and literally in a matter of moments took over the whole world. City streets, various administrative and entertainment buildings, nooks and crannies, and shops all found themselves at the mercy of mindless creatures. The whole situation turned out to be very sad for our protagonist and his girlfriend. She, like many inhabitants of the planet, suffered the same terrible fate. She turned into a zombie due to the virus. From this moment on, he is forced to survive in this crazy world with his girlfriend, trying to protect her and, if possible, also cure her. We see one of the zombies on a chain with a backpack on his back moving towards the grocery store. Having gone inside, he begins to slowly look around and then fill his backpack with products that were able to survive. I'm about to leave for the store, and in my zombie's head, I hear an order to bring several cans of soda standing at the very exit of the store. A few minutes later, we see Edward and the same zombie sitting on the roof of the building, who says that after several days of training, it became easier for him to control it. Our main character is trying once again to understand how he, as an ordinary college student, came to such a life. Half a month ago, a virus appeared that turned most people into zombies whose only concern was hunger. The survivors had to hide so as not to be eaten. Shortly after this chaos began, Edward learned that he could control zombies using his powers. After some time of training, Edward learned to establish a connection with zombies, with the help of which he can control them like puppets. At a given moment in time, our protagonist is able to control only one individual, which for now follows him wherever he goes. One sunny day, we see the main character lying on the bed whose phone receives a call. A woman's voice comes from the phone speaker, reproaching Edward for not waking up yet, after which he abruptly jumps up, realizing that it is the voice of his girlfriend. Hearing Bella's voice, a smile appears on his face. They begin to have a nice conversation, and after some time, our protagonist decides to ask him to do something for him. The girl immediately agrees, which causes a sharp surprise to appear on Edward's face because he hasn't even stated the essence of his request yet. Our main character begins to thank his girlfriend, saying how kind she is and how much she loves her, and literally, a moment later, wild horror appears on his face from Bella's screams. Edward jumps up, and cold sweat breaks out on his face. He realizes that all this was just another of the nightmares that never cease to torment his soul and mind. Having recovered from his fright, he leaves his shelter outside of which sits a chained zombie, over whom he still loses control as soon as he lets down his guard. By closing his eyes and using his powers, he again establishes a mental connection and control over the body of the walking corpse. Edward's main goal at this moment is to get to Bella's house, which is located at the end of the street and is completely infested with a huge horde of brain-eaters. In one of the buildings nearby, a loud crash is heard, causing all the zombies in the area to immediately begin to chase towards its source. Our protagonist understands that this is his chance to get to his girlfriend's apartment. He immediately decides to waste time and, together with his puppet, rush in the opposite direction. Looking out the window and trying to understand what exactly caused that noise, he sees two survivors calling for help, screaming in pain and suffering while they are being eaten alive. To Edward's surprise, he realizes that he doesn't feel anything, looking at these two men being eaten by zombies as if he was absolutely indifferent. Our main character says that no matter what, his main goal is to find Bella and orders the zombies to go outside and inspect his girlfriend's house. She must be somewhere nearby. Through the eyes of the puppet, Edward sees a car accident, wondering if there are living people in the cars, ordering the zombies to move on. Noticing a red bus involved in an accident, he remembers that it was Bella who was riding on it and decides to check for the presence of her body inside the bus. He sees in front of him a tall, slender girl standing in a bloody dress and holding a zombie's head in her right hand. A girl with glowing red eyes immediately notices someone behind her and rushes to attack him. Without having time to react, the girl in an instant with a lightning strike pierces through the puppet controlled by Edward. Our protagonist cannot believe his eyes. The feelings inside him tell him that Bella, standing in front of him, is also infected with the virus. Edward understands that he cannot allow the girl to kill his puppet, because in this case, she will simply run away and decides to take control of it using his power. The imaginary spirit of the main character, which comes from his body, begins to move towards the soul of his girlfriend. Bella's soul looks incredibly defenseless and at the same time tender, being in the absolute emptiness that surrounds it on all sides. Trying to take control of her, a loud explosion of energy is heard, pushing Edward away and preventing him from carrying out his plan. In real time, the girl begins to be filled with rage, and with all her strength, she throws the zombie onto the ground of which she has been holding in her hands all this time. Our protagonist understands that she is resisting. If he fails to take control of her mind, she will remain like this forever. Having gained determination, he is not going to retreat, because saving Bella is one of his main tasks in the chaos that has surrounded him for a long time. Making another attempt to take Bella under control, the subtle emanation from his soul nevertheless touches the consciousness of the fragile, defenseless girl. In real time, the girl's body calms down, and our main character, sitting in a building nearby, exhales because his attempts were crowned with success. Edward orders her to move towards him. Ignoring his request, she freezes for a while and then takes out an incomprehensible red crystal from the back of the zombie's head. You don't understand what's happening. Our main character sees his girlfriend putting this crystal in her mouth. The body of our protagonist is overcome by an incomprehensible and strange sensation by which he understands that this thing restores the strength and health of his girlfriend. Having finally reached Edward, Bella stands opposite him and without moving looks him straight in the eyes, to which he notices that she smells nice. The protagonist presses his forehead to his girlfriend, promising and hoping that he will definitely find a way to fix everything, when suddenly the connection with her is interrupted. Edward does not have time to understand why exactly the connection was broken, and at that very second, Bella throws him to the ground. Due to the fact that the spiritual connection has weakened, the girl rushes at the victim in front of her with a wild desire to kill her. At the last moment, moments before the impact, our protagonist manages to regain control of his girlfriend's body and says that they should go to a safer place and clean her up. After some time, they find themselves not far from a clothing store surrounded by a crowd of zombies, while Edward, using his abilities, senses Bella's desire to kill the walking dead. He remembers the same red crystal that is in the back of the heads of the brain eaters and decides to help his girlfriend get a couple more on the way to the store. Without even having time to think about giving an order, Bella, in the blink of an eye, rushes at one of the standing zombies and smashes him onto the asphalt with a powerful blow. Edward realizes that if he doesn't intervene as soon as possible, his girlfriend could get out of control, and he should find an antidote for her as soon as possible. Our main character, with frantic zeal and despair, rushes into battle with the zombies, helping Bella. The two of them merge in an elegant bloody dance in a matter of minutes, dealing with a huge number of corpse eaters on their way. Our main character exhales, wiping the sweat from his forehead after the battle, and allowing his girlfriend to collect as many crystals as possible and absorb them. Edward manages to notice that when his girlfriend eats this thing, his physical strength increases, and most importantly, that Bella's anger gives him more strength. Having entered our clothing store, the protagonist begins to rummage through things and select an outfit for his girlfriend, while grinning and thinking about all sorts of vulgarities. After which they go to the bathroom to wash away traces of blood and dirt from Bella and also throw out her old torn dress. Edward begins to slowly and with his usual caution remove things from her fragile, delicate, and elegant body. Having finished all the preparations by washing and changing Bella, they sit down together in a chair to take a breath and think about what to do next. While braiding his girlfriend's hair, Edward hears the rumbling in her stomach and understands that she also needs constant support from her body in the form of those very red crystals. Without thinking twice, he decides to go hunting with Bella in order to satisfy her hunger and also at the same time practice maintaining a connection with her. After some time, for some reason he faints, so our main character has to use a neighboring house as a refuge. The next morning, the girl comes to her senses and she is met by Edward, who has been on guard all this time and guarded her while she slept. Looking at his girlfriend, he notices that her eyes have changed slightly and look more energetic. Perhaps this is due to the fact that by eating her own kind, she evolves over time. Edward realizes that his original plan to hide with Bella in the hills has a lot of drawbacks, and most likely he could get hurt if she gets hungry. Therefore, they will have to settle in the city. Looking at his dull kitchen knife, he remembers that somewhere nearby, there should be a family store of Anna's handmade swords, which was very popular. Looking at Bella, he understands that he must try to protect her with all his might, and having collected all the essentials, they move to the store to get a good weapon. Meanwhile, that same Anna is sitting on a chair with her feet on the table, and next to her, some guy is watching what is happening with binoculars. This guy calls out to Anna saying that he noticed two people approaching her store. Looking at what is happening, the guy says that they should warn them, and the zombies in the store, if they don't do this, they will take her swords, to which Anna replies that screaming will only attract zombies. Meanwhile, Edward and Bella penetrate deep into the store, coming close to the door on which the workshop is written and trying to open it. Suddenly, there is a loud crash, and an angry zombie attacks them from behind the door. Our protagonist manages to react and jump back, covering his beloved with himself and trying to analyze and predict how he should fight. When the corpse eater decides to carry out another attack, Edward manages to dodge to the side and with a deft movement of his hand, uses his kitchen knife to cut off his hand, after which he decides to counterattack and perform a roundhouse kick that sends the zombie flying towards the nearest wall. Making a lightning-fast dash towards the zombie lying on the floor, he jumps on him, puts the knife behind his head, and is about to plunge it into the very heart of the corpse eater. Suddenly, the mutant manages to twist his leg and kick Edward away from him in the other direction. I watch everything that happens, and seeing that Edward fails, Bella in an instant finds herself behind the zombie's back, and with a powerful blow pierces his body right through. This zombie clearly turns out to be stronger than ordinary soldiers, and even after receiving serious damage, it manages to react and tries to counterattack, but misses. Having a numerical advantage and realizing that now is the moment to deliver the decisive blow, our main character tries to stab an unsuspecting zombie in the back. After which, with a very strong swing and as far as possible, he sticks a kitchen knife right into the head of the mutant zombie, causing him to fall to the ground with a furious roar. Edward looks around realizing that this enhanced zombie managed to kill a huge number of people. For a second, the thought flashes through his head that if there are individuals like him, then perhaps there are creatures much more terrible and dangerous. He hears Bella's footsteps behind him and turns around to make sure that everything is okay with her and that she was not injured after the battle. The girl pulls the crystal out of the zombie's head and is about to swallow it, but Edward manages to stop her. The protagonist begins to examine this time the green crystal, suggesting that its color and carrier may indicate a higher concentration of the virus. He understands that he needs to find a place to rest because the situation may repeat itself, and they will both lose consciousness after he gives Bella the crystal. Having come to his senses why they came here, he decides to find a suitable weapon among the many swords. He looks at the display cases and realizes that Anna's sword store lives up to its reputation because the quality and price of the weapons are simply divine. Walking through the hall, Edward is alarmed by a dull sound coming from under one tile on the floor, under which there may be a hiding place. Lifting one section, he sees in front of him a box with unique things inside. Having picked up the dagger lying in our box, the hero decides that he has found something amazing since it was hidden on purpose, and decides to take it for himself as a weapon. With a smile on their faces, they both leave the store, glad that they were both unharmed and were able to get such a catch. Anna is watching all this through binoculars, who is horrified that they were able to defeat that zombie and take her dagger. She's angry and furious because she's been here all this time, waiting to sneak in and take her favorite dagger. Anna's acquaintance tries to stop her, saying that they are clearly unusual people because they were able to kill a mutant zombie, but the girl is still going to catch up with them and take him away. The guy suggests abandoning this idea and going to a familiar blacksmith to see if there are any other survivors there. Anna agrees, saying that her cousin also inherited something from her grandfather. Her skill may not be so bad and they should go there. Finally, she shows an obscene gesture with her right hand, saying that she curses the one who dared to take her favorite dagger. Meanwhile, our main character sits and thinks about the fact that now he and Bella need to be careful more than ever, because the situation in which they find themselves still remains shrouded in mysteries. Having reached the intended hiding place, he begins to treat the front door with a disinfectant to get rid of the smell and not attract other zombies. Having processed the door, he locks it with a bolt. They say that this method of conspiracy is effective only in places where the number of zombies is small. You understand that now they are at least somewhat safe. He decides to give away the same green crystal that they were able to extract from the body of a mutant zombie. After he puts a mysterious green crystal in Bella's mouth, without thinking twice, she immediately swallows it without the slightest doubt. At that same second, a very strong pain arises in Edward's chest, so sharp and unexpected that it plunges him into shock. From such a surprise, he immediately falls to his knees, realizing that in a moment he will lose consciousness. According to first impressions, at least more than 20 hours have passed since our heroes lost consciousness. Our main character finds the strength to at least sit down and lean on the real chest of drawers behind him, not understanding what happened to him and how long he was passed out. He looks around the room he is in and realizes that Bella is not around, and most likely she is out of control. Deciding to test his superpowers, he feels that the connection between him and Bella is still active and leads somewhere outside. Using his power, he moves on, using the connection with his girlfriend, and sees her going down the stairs, not understanding how she moves on her own without his order. He decides to follow her down to that very place and sees Bella standing in front of him at the window, her face illuminated by the rays of the bright and warming sun. Edward looks at his girlfriend with incredible delight, and in his eyes there's a slight hope that she has finally recovered. He runs up to her and hugs her tightly behind her back, saying that he is immensely glad that her condition is gradually getting better. He realizes that the slight shock of the situation made him wonder if his girlfriend had regained her memory. He looks into her eyes, holding her tender neck with his hands, saying that everything will be fine, because at least now she has some emotional expression on her face and she can move on her own. He orders her to follow him because she will probably be able to return to normal life if they continue to evolve and feed her crystals. The two of them set out on the streets of the city, infested with a huge number of zombies, and Edward also notices that Bella has evolved very much and has become much stronger. While the girl alone deals with hordes of zombies, he sees that in her eyes they are like inferior creatures who do not deserve the slightest right to life. Also, looking at his girlfriend, Edward wonders how she will react when they have to face other survivors. He wipes the dirt and bruises from her face, knowing that he will do his best to prevent her from attacking other people using his control abilities. At the same moment, he hears loud noises and screams behind him, suggesting that it could be other survivors. He looks around and sees in the distance a guy and a girl surrounded by a huge number of corpse eaters walking straight towards them. He notices how a girl armed with a beautiful and graceful katana in the blink of an eye deals with the nearest zombie trying to attack her. This girl with long black hair and a red headband with white flowers on her head turns to her friend and says that they should go back to the store. They change the course of their movement, turn towards the building standing behind them, and begin to make their way deeper into the store. Edward, observing the whole situation that is happening from afar, remaining unnoticed, understands that this girl is clearly unusual, and there is something about her that is. Not only is she skilled in combat, but she is also not afraid of zombies. A certain confidence emanates from her body, and if she were an ordinary girl, she would have already turned pale and trembled with fear. He looks at Bella and suggests that she may also be a person with unusual abilities, and now is not the right time to meet her. Edward turns around, deciding to leave and not get involved in conflicts because it could harm him and his girlfriend. A green-haired guy who is clearly a friend of the girl with a katana notices our main characters and decides to call out to them asking for help. Edward is clearly unhappy with the current situation because his screams attracted the attention of nearby zombies. He decides that there is no way out anyway, and he needs to help these two because if this girl is really a person with abilities, she can find out Bella's true essence. He snatches from its sheath the same dagger that they recently got from the sword store and intends to defend themselves from the zombies attacking them. Meanwhile, the girl with the katana tells her friend not to scream because by doing this, he attracts even more hordes of corpse eaters. The guy with green hair points out that he noticed other survivors, and they might help them. A girl with black hair and a red headband turns around and looks outside the store of our protagonist, who is dealing with corpse eaters. Edward manages to fight with ease because after Bella's evolution, his abilities also improved, and now he can control 3 zombies at the same time. He uses his powers to take control of nearby zombies and order them to simply step on him without attempting to attack and treats them like pathetic dolls. A guy with green hair sees our main character fighting coolly and tells the girl with a katana, whose name is Shanna, to pay attention to this. A beautiful and slender girl with a katana, whose name is Shanna, says that this does not concern her at all. The green-haired guy and his girlfriend are running towards our protagonist, hoping that he will help them get rid of the crowd of zombies that is chasing them. As he runs past them, he grabs Edward's hand, telling him to follow them and he will lead them to safety. Together, they manage to break away from the mindless creatures pursuing them and take refuge in a nearby quiet alley. Shanna tries to calmly analyze the situation by saying that they only got rid of them for a while. Her friend with green hair tries to catch his breath, and through sighs says a big thank you to our hero for not leaving them to die. He looks at Bella saying that they are very cool together because they fought so bravely and ran well, and apparently have the same good stamina as his Shanna. The girl with the katana immediately decides to object to her friend, telling him not to address her as if she belonged to him, saying that they were just classmates. The green-haired guy once again thanks our heroes for their help, inviting them to come to their shelter to rest because they have plenty of beer. Edward thanks them, but decides to refuse in his head, realizing that although his girlfriend looks like a normal person, it would be better to reduce contact with other survivors to a minimum. He once again tries to persuade Edward to go with them, to which Shanna replies that if they don't want to go, there is no need to force them. A moment later, the girl manages to notice Edward's dagger sticking out and unsheathed and tries to snatch it, but misses as he manages to react and return it. Shanna falls face down on the ground, and her friend, confused, asks what came over her and why she behaves this way in front of other people. Dissatisfaction is clearly visible on the face of the girl with the katana. She asks where our protagonist managed to get this dagger, to which she receives the answer that it does not concern her. She continues to insist on her opinion. Without such wild aggression on her face, she once again asks where he got this weapon, asking him to tell him everything in detail. Edward replies that he took it from a sword store, which causes Shauna wild surprise and misunderstanding. Sitting on her knees, the girl examines the protagonist's dagger, asking whether any of the survivors inside the store survived, or whether they are all long dead. Edward looks away, asking Shanna to get up from her knees and stop staring at him from the waist down. She immediately turns her gaze to Bella, saying that he has nothing to worry about because his girlfriend doesn't mind at all. Shanna immediately runs up to Bella, hugging her hand and pressing her whole body against her, saying that such a beautiful girl obviously won't be jealous. At this second, the thought of tearing the victim standing next to her into pieces flashes through Bella's head. But Edward manages to order her not to move, using his strength. Edward warns that his girlfriend cannot speak, to which Shanna expresses regret that such a beauty turned out to be completely not mine, and asks for forgiveness. She holds Bella's hand, apologizing once again, saying that she doesn't look very good and she should rest in their hideout. She also looks at Edward, saying that she liked him too and should follow her and have a good rest, and also drink some beer. But they don't grab their hands, and the forces begin to drag them along, saying that they haven't seen the survivors for a long time and they have something to chat about. After some time, they find themselves in one of the apartments of a multi-story building somewhere not far from their meeting place. The green-haired guy says that the place is small and they will have to make room a little, but it is clean and safe. The door to the apartment is opened by a young girl dressed exactly like Shanna and happy that they returned unharmed. This girl manages to notice Bella and Edward, asking how they managed to meet two more survivors. They go inside the apartment in which there are several more people, and the guy with green hair begins to tell what things they managed to bring after today's hunt. Edward manages to assess the situation and notice a huge number of people in their apartment, and that this is clearly not without reason. The green-haired guy remembers his new acquaintances and introduces Edward and Bella to everyone in the apartment. He grabs our protagonist by the shoulder, saying that even though they have known each other for so long, he still doesn't know his name, to which he receives the answer that his name is Edward, and his girlfriend is Bella. He also asks not to ask her too many questions since she doesn't know how to talk, after which he points his hand at her. The green-haired guy decides to notify everyone that Edward helped them out a lot, so they decided to invite him here and have lunch together. One of the guys lying on the sofa notices that how could he help them? After all, Shauna can handle it very well herself. One of the girls asks the guy lying on the couch, whose name is Jacob, not to be so rude, and he, in turn, makes the situation seem like they just want to eat for free and she shouldn't shield them. The green-haired guy also decides to stand up for Edward, saying that they know practically nothing about him and he helped them out a lot. Jacob tells his friend Emmett not to be so kind because there is only enough food and water and they have nothing to feed strangers. Emmett turns towards Shanna, asking her to support him in any way and prove him wrong. Our main character assumes that they just want to laugh at him, and he is not too interested in quarreling with such petty people who like to drive strangers away. He waves his hand, turns around and is about to leave, saying that he doesn't want to become a parasite and it's better for him to leave. Jacob immediately jumps up, saying that he will not be able to feed his girlfriend, and this is just window dressing. In order to present himself as a real man, he should not behave so arrogantly. At the same second, Edward makes a sharp jerk towards the offender, since he clearly did not like what he said. He grabs Jacob by the clothes, lifting him up above him and pinning him against the wall. Jacob immediately decides to issue another insult towards his girlfriend, for which Edward instantly slaps him in the face with his right hand. Our main character points his finger at him, saying that this is called a well-deserved slap in the face, and if he says one more word about his girlfriend, he will give him another one. Jacob immediately tries to find help in the eyes of Shauna, who asks Edward to let him go, saying that he already hit him and there is no need to quarrel. The offender clearly does not want to apologize and admit his responsibility for the words spoken, so he receives another slap in the face with the left side of his palm. Shauna orders her friend to apologize, saying that his dirty mouth is to blame and he should think better about what he says. Jacob forcefully asks for forgiveness, thinking only that he did all this in order to save food, which they already have little of, considering their friends. Emmett immediately runs up to our main character, also asking him for forgiveness because he did not imagine that something like this could happen. Edward decides to clarify who all these people are and why they count so much on the fact that Emmett and Shanna will get food for them, in return receiving that they are all classmates from the same boarding school. Emmett tries to explain that Jacob has a very rich family, which is why he has such a bad temper, to which Edward waves his hand and says that he wants nothing to do with him. Shauna decides to stop them, saying that the speed is getting dark and they better stay here for the night because zombies are much more dangerous at night. She grabs his hand at the last moment, squeezing it tightly, and with the last of her strength praying that they stay and not leave. She looks into Edward's eyes, saying that he is very strong and experienced in fighting the infected, and they need his help. He turns to her and with an arrogant look on his face says that he refuses such an offer. Shanna is not going to let Edward go just like that, and continues to hold his hand despite his displeasure. The girl looks at the main character with a pitiful look, saying that they are all survivors, and they need to stick together and help each other. Our protagonist once again expresses his dissatisfaction while looking at Jacob and says that he will never help in his life if it has to do with this person. He glances at Shauna's classmates present in the room, saying that feeding these mediocrities is her personal choice, and he is not going to help her with this. The girl tries to catch him, saying that he will agree to help them if it is not connected with Jacob, and smiles maliciously. Shauna says that they are students from the 3rd high school, to which Edward replies that this is a very prestigious boarding school, and of course he has heard about it. The girl explains that when they left their school, some of their classmates remained there and asks our protagonist to help them get there. Edward looks at them with a straight face, asking what he will get for his help, causing complete bewilderment in the eyes of those around him. Emmett is immediately disappointed in people, saying that, in his opinion, in case of disaster, people should have helped each other, but the world still remained incredible. Shauna says that his demands are very reasonable, but it seems to her that he has already received payment since he took the dagger forged by her cousin Anna. Edward looks at his dagger, wondering how a small and fragile girl, being Shauna's cousin, could forge such an amazing weapon. She explains that it was their grandfather who taught them blacksmithing, and although her skills are not that good, this dagger is still very good. After which she grabs Bella by the shoulders, suggesting that they have agreed on this, which means they should stay overnight with them, and they won't have to worry about anything. Edward explains that he would never leave his girlfriend alone in the world, knowing deep down that if he leaves her with defenseless people, he will only see mountains of corpses when he returns. Shauna notes that he is a worthy man since he protects his girlfriend so carefully and carefully. When the conversations and debates end, Emmett decides to please his classmates by telling them that their new acquaintance has agreed to go to school with them. A girl with long yellow hair objects that they really should go to help them because they have been dead for a long time. Shauna sharply objects, saying that they must do this because she promised to return and save them. She also notes that if it weren't for their classmates and teachers who covered their backs, they would already be in the stomachs of zombies. The guy with glasses decides to agree with Shauna's decision, saying that if they leave them there and don't come back, it will be very selfish. He also decides to begin dictating his terms and making plans for the further development of affairs, to which Edward immediately objects. He explains that all those present have no combat skills. In addition, most of them will play into the hands of the enemy because they will become an easy target. Shauna explains to him that he doesn't have to worry about their safety because all he has to do is help them get to the school building. A slight panic and uncertainty about what awaits them begins to spread among all the classmates present. The guy with glasses decides to speak out again, saying that if they have a weapon, in theory they will be able to protect themselves. Edward orders everyone to go to bed and rest because tomorrow morning they will have a difficult test. Shauna manages to warn him that she will not let him spend the night with other guys and his girlfriend should stay with other classmates. Edward clearly has time to think of something, so he agrees with an arrogant smile and wishes them a good rest. Walking out the door, he realizes that he cannot leave his girlfriend alone and must always keep her under control. He uses his superpowers to control Bella and see everything that happens through her eyes. Shauna drags Bella by the hand, saying that today she will sleep in the same bed with her because there are no more places. Chance looks at Bella, asking why she doesn't undress before going to bed, wondering if she sleeps with her clothes on all the time. I assume that she is shy. Shauna offers to undress her himself while jumping on top of her and pressing his body against hers. She offers to undress if she is shy, providing her body for undressing and puts Bella's hand on her chest. Meanwhile, Edward, being in the boys' bedroom and lying on the bed, wonders why Shauna suddenly got this into her head. I understand that now it is he who controls his girlfriend's body and decides to agree with the request of his new friend. He takes control of Bella's body and throws Shanna onto the bed, standing on top of her, which makes her suddenly surprised. Not understanding what is happening, she begins to slowly undress Shanna, causing slight embarrassment to appear on her face, as well as embarrassment from everything that is happening. Thoughts flash through her head that even though a girl is undressing her, for some reason she feels as if a guy is looking at her, and she is incredibly ashamed. The level of awkwardness begins to go off scale, and Shatter decides to end this performance as soon as possible by saying that they need to go to bed to rest. Edward is clearly not going to stop and then suddenly grabs her shirt, tearing it off and contemplating Shanna's naked and tender body. In his thoughts, our protagonist grins at Ashana at this time and promises that he will no longer misbehave, looking at the imperturbable Bella. After which Edward orders Bella to go to bed and breaks off the connection with her, ceasing to control her body. Shani, at that moment, covers herself with some of the clothes remaining on her and, dissatisfied, shouts at her classmates so that you too can quickly go to bed. Before going to bed, she also states that it would be very becoming for Bella to smile more often because her beauty deserves it. Shanna also expresses her thoughts that she initially imagined Edward as an abuser who forced a defenseless girl to follow him. But after I heard from him that you couldn't speak, I realized that he was not a scumbag at all. The next morning, all classmates, including our heroes, gather on the street near the shelter and plan their hike. They discuss a plan for further action and also distribute supplies of water and food to everyone. Meanwhile, Jacob and the guy with glasses watch all this from the side, judging Edward for taking their supplies. He is clearly still unhappy about the situation where he received several slaps and wants revenge on our main character. Edward decides to clarify what weapons they have for primary self-defense, with the exception of the katana that Shanna wields. You understand that the only weapon of self-defense is a kitchen knife. They distribute everything they have to each of their classmates. Sometime later, they begin to move towards the school, simultaneously dealing with obstacles in the form of zombies. Edward understands that Shanna and Emmett work well together, and it would be much better and easier for the two of them to survive in this chaos. Analyzing his connection with Bella, Edward realizes that the crystals of ordinary zombies are no longer suitable for her evolution. He understands that, given the course of things, he needs more mutated or much stronger infected. Analyzing everything that happened, he understands that mutated zombies can be found in closed spaces, such as hospitals, schools, and shops. While Edward was in thought, one of his classmates was grabbed by a zombie through the window of a street store. He manages to break the window and through a hole in the glass, drags him inside the building, plunging everyone nearby into shock. Our protagonist instantly understands that he needs to save the poor fellow as soon as possible. He breaks into the store through a hole in the glass and sees how that same guy is devoured by a zombie and manages to take control of it. After which, with a cool and imperturbable face, in an instant he cuts the insidious corpse eater into pieces. After which, Shauna immediately runs into the store, trying to figure out why everyone is panicking and what happened. Our protagonist explains that their classmate can no longer be helped, and they need to move on because he is dead. After the incident, all the untempered classmates crowd around the mirror display and discuss what happened. Jana understands that she must not give in, and using her leadership qualities, orders everyone to move on. Edward notes that no matter how stupid this girl is, at critical moments she is actually quite decisive. Jacob, standing nearby at this moment, looks at our main character, blaming him for everything that happened. The guy with glasses grabs him by the hand and drags him along, saying that they need to go because without their help, they will simply be eaten. While Jacob blames Edward for everything, the guy with glasses explains that without his and Shanna's help, they will be easy prey. He also notices that Edward is much more stern and cold-blooded than Shanna and can force her to obey, leaving them completely alone. Jacob complains that it's all Edward's fault, who dared to hit him, and he simply cares about his survival and the survival of his friends. His friend adjusts his glasses, asking him if it seems that the fewer people there are, the more advantage they will have. He explains that now he depends on Shanna, and in his place he would be smarter because he will never win her love. He also warns Jacob against making rash decisions, saying that Edward is much stronger than him. The guy who received several slaps in the face from our main character bares his teeth, calling his classmate a traitor. Meanwhile, the whole group of people moves on, stumbling upon another crowd of zombies and deciding what to do. Shanna realizes that fighting such a huge pile of zombies is impractical and offers to distract them. Edward immediately decides not to send weaklings forward and offers himself as a distraction. He explains that everyone present should find a place to hide, and when the zombies start chasing him, they should immediately run away. Emmett, with tears in his eyes, puts his hand on the main character's shoulder, thanking him and saying that he is a real man. Edward understands perfectly well that he is the only suitable candidate, because if Shanna goes to distract the zombies, the chance of her returning is not great. The girl thanks our protagonist for such dedication, warning him and asking him to be careful. Having ordered the entire group of people to look for a place to hide, he, accompanied by Bella, goes to an electronics store. Having opened the door, zombies immediately begin to attack him from all sides with the desire to tear him into pieces. Using his improved abilities, he immediately manages to take control of all the zombies. Having ordered the zombies under control not to move, he begins to move along the display cases, collecting mobile phones from the shelves. After some time, he constructs a necklace from telephones and hangs one on each of the zombies that he has taken control of. He checks whether the phones work as he intended and also sets the maximum volume on each one, preparing his insidious plan. He opens the door of the store and orders the zombies to run as fast as they can in the opposite direction from the shelter where their friends are located. As soon as the zombies start running, he uses his mobile phone to play one of his favorite songs at full volume. The sound and volume of several dozen telephones begin to attract a huge crowd of corpse eaters that follows the three puppets. At this time, all present survivors in the shelter also hear the sounds of music emanating nearby. I watch everything that happens. Shanna accuses the main character of acting like a complete fool, and his plan is no worse than the idea of a 5-year-old child. You understand that this is the very moment he was talking about. She immediately orders everyone to immediately get down and run. All odnoklasniki begin to leave the walls of the shelter in formation and move in the opposite direction. Meanwhile, a crowd of zombies still continues to chase the Three Stooges to explore the sound of music. While the zombies are distracted, the survivors manage to catch up with Edward and Bella, saying that they have little time left and should hurry. Unexpectedly for everyone, someone's corpse falls from the roof of a multi-story building to which zombies were attracted. At this moment, the entire crowd of corpse eaters is sharply distracted by the sound of the fall and turns their attention to our heroes. Edward realizes that they have very little time left, grabs the girls by the hands and rushes away, saving them. Our heroes are trying with all their might to escape from the horde of crazed zombies pursuing them. Our protagonist is trying his best to convince those present to find cover because they will not be able to fight these creatures in the open. Nearby, they notice a multi-story building and run inside a store with screw-type doors. The crowd of zombies pursuing them begins to slowly make their way through small cracks in buildings and doors, pursuing our main characters. Edward realizes that they are in a rather hopeless situation and orders everyone to take up defensive positions, destroying the mindless creatures one by one. Our main characters begin to defend themselves slowly, dealing with the zombies that spring from all the cracks. Meanwhile, nearby classmates led by Jacob do not understand what to do in this situation. The guy with glasses supports him, saying that he doesn't know what to do, just like him, because there were no orders from Shanna. At this moment, zombies also begin to descend the stairs from the upper floors of the building to the sounds of battle, from which our heroes find themselves clamped in a vice. One of his classmates is about to scream about the approaching danger, when suddenly someone pushes him in the back. He turns around and sees guys in glasses in front of him asking him, "Michael, why are you doing this?" He falls to the ground and immediately begins to be eaten by a crowd of zombies, from which he can only scream and scream for help. One of the classmates standing nearby is also attacked by another zombie, who with his mouth open is about to bite off a tasty piece of meat from her. At the same second, I manage to save Bella, who with lightning speed manages to repel the attack of the attacking corpse eater. The frightened girl looks at our heroine, thanking her from the bottom of her heart, saying that now she owes her her life. Meanwhile, Edward, using his ability to control zombies, continues to deal with the crowd from the street. He understands that his strength is almost running out because so much use of force exhausts his body. Our main character orders everyone to immediately retreat to slow down because if they continue, none of them will survive. Sounds and cries for help are heard from the upper floors, and Edward orders them not to stop and to think about their own survival first. Using his powers, he orders Bella to protect any classmates who are in danger. She manages to grab the kitchen knife of one of the defenders and, with its help, begins to chop up the approaching danger. After some time, he manages to fight off such a significant horde of zombies, leaving only mountains of corpses on the floor. Emmett falls to the floor from exhaustion, wiping sweat from his forehead and saying that they were so close to death and he already saw the light at the end of the tunnel. After all the commotion is over, Shauna notices that 2 of their classmates have disappeared somewhere. Emmett remembers what he noticed during the battle and saw how 2 guys climbed the stairs to the upper floors of the building. Shauna holds a katana in her hand, saying that she still has strength left and they need to rise and check if they are alive. Edward explains that this is not necessary and they are most likely already dead, because if there are zombies on the first floor, then there are them on the rest. They look at the cracked walls and the ceiling from which loud screams and screams can be heard. A slight desperation clearly begins to appear in Sean's eyes. She leans on her katana and thinks that 4 people have already died through her fault. Our main character tries to calm the girl down by saying that if it weren't for her help, all her classmates would have been dead a long time ago. At the same moment, a fit of rage of one of his classmates takes over, and he, grabbing the guy with glasses, begins to say that it is all his fault. Grabbing a kitchen knife that was lying nearby, he puts it behind his back and is about to stab. At that very second, lightning-fast reflexes and reaction allow Shauna to knock the knife out of his hands and prevent the murder. Emmett also decides not to stand aside, and at the same second hits his classmate in the face, asking if he is crazy. There is obvious dissatisfaction on the face of the guy with glasses, and given his actions, this is clearly not the last meanness he will commit. Image, in turn, tries to explain to his friend that the weapon is intended for self-defense, and not to point it at people. A classmate tries to stop the emerging conflict by saying that everything is fine, and considering that he was not hurt. They should not quarrel. Edward examines all the survivors present, realizing that the losses will not end there, and not everyone will reach the final goal of their journey. The guy with glasses is worried whether Edward saw how he set up his classmate, and decides to find out why he is looking at him so intently. Our protagonist replies that he was just thinking, and they shouldn't hesitate and move on. Meanwhile, the path of our heroes lies through an underground supermarket at the entrance of which there is a crowd of corpse eaters. In one of the rooms of this underground supermarket, there is a strange, huge, and at the same time ominous silhouette. This turns out to be an even larger and clearly much stronger zombie than the ones our heroes met. Having reached this very descent underground, our heroes begin to descend down in a slender and well-calibrated column. Emmett tries to assess the situation. They say that, judging by the silence of the local premises, there is no one here. Shauna suggests exploring this place and breaking up into small groups to help each other if something happens. Edward invites Shauna to stay with everyone else, while he, accompanied by Bella, looks at the inside of the store. Making his way deeper into the store, Edward notices that after the last battle, his psyche has improved significantly, and his visual acuity has also increased. Our main character always thinks that someone is watching him since they entered the underground supermarket. The protagonist notices that his girlfriend's innate reflexes are beginning to squeal very loudly, and most likely, there is a very strong mutant nearby. Screams begin to be heard from the depths of the store, and our heroes immediately begin to follow the sounds to check what is happening there. Turning the corner, they see one of their classmates being eaten by the same mutated zombie, and Jacob just watches all this. The guy who is being eaten by a zombie screams in unbearable pain, asking his friends to help him and save him. A moment later, Zombie decides to switch from one victim to another, rushing after Jacob standing next to him. He notices Edward and Bella running towards him, asking them to help him. Edward takes out his dagger, realizing that in front of him is a very strong and formidable enemy, and he needs to be extremely careful. Although the mutant zombie has enormous dimensions, it is still incredibly fast and agile, and almost manages to catch up with Jacob. Having overtaken him, he makes a sharp wave of his hand, causing him to quickly fly into the nearby shelves. Absolutely without losing concentration with his second free hand, he swings in the hope of smearing our main character across the floor. Edward's reflexes allow him to react and dodge an attack that is much stronger and faster than that of ordinary zombies. The main character understands that he cannot hesitate, and he must deal with him as soon as possible before Shanna arrives. He uses his powers to loosen his control over Bella, giving her complete freedom of action and the ability to fight at full strength. At the same moment, as if by magic, she appears behind the zombie's back and makes a powerful blow along the entire length of his body. Edward decides to use attack tactics from several sides, and while the zombie is distracted by his girlfriend, tries to strike again. Together with his girlfriend, they manage to inflict several targeted piercing and cutting blows on him, causing the zombies to bleed. Having received a sufficiently large amount of damage, the mutant continues to resist. Edward understands that he must find his weak point. Using his abilities, which have recently undergone slight improvements, he tries to take control of such a massive and formidable enemy. I'm trying to simultaneously keep the Bella of another mutant zombie under control. His nose begins to bleed, and he spends too much energy. Well, still, overcoming the pain and gathering all his strength, he manages to make the mutant zombie not move for a few seconds. These couple of seconds are enough for Bella to pierce through the giant's skull with a lightning strike and destroy him. Also, in parallel with the blow, she manages to remove a bright green crystal from the corpse eater's head, which clearly has incredible power. Towards the very end of the battle, Shanna and Emmett come running to the sounds of screams of blows, clearly rushing to help. The girl's face clearly shows incredible shock from what she saw, because she had never seen anything like this in her life. Edward and Bella are standing near the lifeless body of a mutant zombie, who appears to be several times larger than both of them. Wiping the blood from his face, the protagonist answers Shauna's question that he is fine and there is nothing to worry about. Analyzing the battle, Edward realizes that his psyche has become much stronger, and perhaps he will be able to control two strong zombies at once. At this time, Emmett notices Jacob lying in the chest of the wreckage asking for help. The wounded victim looks at Edward, cursing him for the fact that he had time to save him, but did not do it. The same classmate who was originally eaten by a zombie is on the verge of life and death and asks Shanna to help him. With tears in her eyes, the girl picks up a katana and says that she cannot do otherwise, after which she ends the torment of her friend. She explains that she could not do otherwise in this situation because they cannot help him in any way, but only prolong his suffering. Shanna is also trying to clarify whether everything is okay with our heroes, because they very quickly manage to cope with a huge mutated corpse eater. Hearing from Edward that everything is fine and she shouldn't worry, she thinks about the fact that this guy is clearly hiding something from her. The sign that has been helping and bandaging Jacob all this time tells our heroes that, in his opinion, he will not be able to go further. He says that the color of his wounds is the same as the zombies, and that he might transform if they leave him like that. Offering various options for solving the problem, Shanna immediately refuses the option of taking him with her. In such a situation, they should not risk taking him as ballast because the rest of his classmates are already turning away from him. Edward decides not to take part in this conversation, saying that these are their personal problems and he is responsible for people he does not know. Shanna offers to leave Jacob here for a while, and if they return and see that everything is fine with him, they will take him back. Hearing all this, Edward realizes that he may not appreciate it at all, and the food and water will be wasted. They take Jacob to a safe room, leaving him some food and water, and telling him to come back when they leave school and check on him. Dissatisfaction with everything that is happening is clearly visible on his face, but understanding the position he is in, he has no choice but to agree. Turning around at the end, Edward looks at Jacob, realizing that he deserved this state of affairs with his behavior and attitude towards other people. After some time, our heroes find themselves near the building of the third high school, to which their path lay. Our protagonist notes that the situation looks too suspicious, and Emmett reports that all the zombies are most likely inside the school. In such closed places, there should be many zombies without food. They will mercilessly devour each other, and then it won't take long for them to mutate. Based on Bella's gut feelings, he realizes that she has smelled several mutants inside the building. I'm about to move forward, Edward stops Shanna, saying that at this point their paths diverge and he will go on his way. The girl smiles sweetly at him and says that in any case, she is grateful to both of them for their help and hopes that they can meet again. Emmett finally offers to give them a small part of his provisions, to which he receives a polite refusal and gratitude. Our protagonist finally says that he still has some business to do at this school and they may well see each other again. After some time, moving along the deserted floors of the school building, the eyes begin to turn red again, foreshadowing the appearance of a mutated one. At the end of the corridor, they notice an elevator shaft, which, judging by the indications on the buttons, is still working. Bella immediately tries to react and start moving towards the elevator, but Edward manages to stop her with his strength. Without making hasty decisions, he decides to first check the elevator car by throwing an eraser lying nearby in his direction. Once on the desired floor, an incredibly loud growl and scream begins to be heard from the elevator car. In an instant, the elevator car opens and an angry zombie with glowing red eyes rushes at our heroes. Our protagonist manages to repel the attack using his weapon and stopping both of the attacker's hands. Using her favorite tactic, Bella tries to stab her in the back, but the speed and reflexes of this mutant are clearly superior to the previous ones, and he manages to dodge. The reflexes and speed of this mutant clearly surpass those of humans, and after a successful goal, he immediately tries to make a counterattack. Trying to defend himself, Edward loses his grip, causing the zombie to knock the weapon out of his hands. Without being confused and maintaining concentration, our main character manages to use his powers to take control of the corpse eater for a second. Bella, without losing the slightest chance, manages to deliver a sharp blow to the back, causing the zombie to lose his right arm. The attacker clearly does not like this state of affairs, and he, holding the rest of his hand, begins to frantically scream at our heroes. Edward manages to pick up a dagger lying nearby that he dropped. They say that now that he has lost his arm, he will become less dangerous. This time, together with his girlfriend, they decide not to distract the zombies from each other, and the two of them go into a frontal attack. Having received serious damage, the mutant can no longer defend himself so well and begins to receive even more injuries. A guy and a girl in love decide not to leave the enemy the slightest chance to escape or counterattack, continuing to advance and crush him with a series of blows. Edward manages to take control of the mutated zombie for another moment, giving Bella a chance to finish him off with one blow. Using her mutated body, the girl manages to slam the zombie into the floor with incredible force. Having collapsed to the ground, our heroes manage to catch their breath, realizing that the battle has been won, and they have won. Edward takes the crystal out of the zombie's head, realizing that it looks completely different from the previous ones because its owner is much stronger. Bella immediately opens her mouth asking Edward to absorb the prey he found, to which she refuses. He puts the crystal in his jacket pocket, saying that I will do it later in a safer place. Together with his girlfriend, our main character begins to make his way through the floors of the building, simultaneously clearing out all the zombies in their way. After some time, the two of them manage to collect a fairly large number of both weak and stronger crystals. Looking at his girlfriend, Edward realizes that the more crystals she can absorb, the sooner, in his opinion, she will be able to return to her human form. All these battles, according to our protagonist, improve both his physical skills and his spiritual connection with Bella. Edward asks his girlfriend to help him get up because he is too tired from fighting so much. At this moment, an item of clothing in the form of a garter falls from Bella's body right in front of his face. Raising his head, our main character sees his girlfriend's huge breasts in front of him and feels slightly awkward. He picks up the garter from the floor and returns it to its rightful place, tying it to his lover's collar. After which our heroes continue to move further along the floors of the building in search of the infected. At the same moment, using Bella's instincts, Edward realizes that there are still zombies in the school building, although in his opinion, they killed everyone. He understands that Shanna most likely does not have the strength to deal with the mutant zombie alone, and decides to find him on her own as soon as possible. Meanwhile, in the schoolyard, we see a wounded and disgusting-looking silhouette of a man. It turns out that half of Jacob has already mutated and turned into something vile and incomprehensible. Meanwhile, Shauna, accompanied by her classmates, is already very close to the place where their friends are hiding. Some of the classmates are talking about how their friends were without food or water all this time, and most likely they are no longer alive. The girl explains that she is quite ready for such an outcome of events, and holding her katana at the ready, says that they must fulfill their promise and check. They get to the very school office in which apparently the remaining survivors should be. They try to knock on the door asking if there is anyone inside, to which they hear joyful exclamations from their friends in response. The door opens and they see the teacher's bloody, stained face in front of them, which plunges them into shock. Shauna claims that when they left there were more than 20 students and teachers here, and where did some of them disappear to? The girl pushes the teacher aside, saying that she herself wants to see what happened while they were not around. Shauna's face freezes from the horror she sees, which cannot be compared in abomination to any zombie virus. They see before them the gnawed bones of their friends, as well as a handful of survivors eating the last pieces of human flesh. Emmett tries to hold back the urge to vomit, saying that it's just disgusting to eat your own kind. The teacher standing next to the girl begins to rejoice, saying that they will no longer have to live like this, and they will be able to get them out of here. Fury fills Shauna, after which she strikes with a lightning-quick kick right in the teacher's face. The man does not understand what is happening. He tries to get up to recover after the blow, asking what she is doing. Shauna covers her face with her hand, saying that Edward was right, and all these people are just a bunch of worthless parasites. She explains that they could provide for themselves, but instead of searching for food, they chose to eat their comrades alive. Shauna says that the weak cannot be blamed for seeking protection, but if they want to justify eating their friends with their weakness, then they are much worse than zombies. The girl turns around and leaves, saying that she is not going to help such scum, and now they are on their own. All the survivors present begin to blame Shanna for this state of affairs, and screaming, rush at her with the desire to kill her. Without the slightest shadow of doubt, the girl swings her katana, cutting off the head of one of the attackers. Meanwhile, Edward and Bella continue to explore the school premises in search of a mutated zombie. They stumble upon another classroom littered with mountains of corpses, finding no signs of mutated ones. Trying to verify his assumptions, Edward pays attention to Bella's reflexes, which do not foretell any danger. Finding no evidence of danger, they decide to go to other buildings of the school and check the location of the mutant zombie. Meanwhile, the headless body of one of the attackers falls to the ground with a roar, shocking the cannibals. Shauna turns to the offender, and on her face there is rage and a desire to tear these non-entities into small pieces. All those survivors whom our heroes came to save immediately begin to run away in the opposite direction. Shauna is not going to let any of them go because she has finally decided to put an end to these vile creatures. One of the teachers bows, begging for mercy and asking not to kill him because he will do whatever she wants. The girl does not agree, suggesting that apparently he heard the same thing from those people whom they killed and ate. The teacher raises his head trying to justify his actions, and at that very second, Shauna's katana cuts off his head. At this moment, the girl is caught up by her classmates, who have accompanied her all this time. They see Shanna's imperturbable figure in front of them, as well as her clothes completely bloodied on her face and a katana in her hand. Emmett runs up to her trying to bring her to her senses, realizing that the girl is in an unconscious position. At the same moment, one of the mutated zombies appears behind them and manages to kill one of their classmates. Everyone present begins to run away in panic, trying to save their lives. Trying to catch up and tear apart one of the children, the zombie decides to attack the backs of the defenseless and motionless Shauna. The guy with glasses manages to notice this and understands that they can't survive without her, and decides to commit another vile act. He grabs one of his classmates and pushes him towards the zombies again, drawing attention away from Shauna. The mutant is distracted by the body of an innocent guy and begins to gnaw his neck, causing drops of blood to fall on Shauna's face. This brings the girl to her senses, and she manages to react and pierce the zombie with her katana. Everyone present stands around the body of their dead classmate, deciding what to do next. The girl, who has experienced incredible stress after everything that happened, says that they cannot hesitate and need to move forward. All this time, they were watched from afar by Jacob, who is clearly here to take revenge. He decides to attack on the sly and grab Shanna, to which she manages to react, but is unable to defend herself. Jacob's physical abilities have clearly increased after the mutation, and he manages to make a powerful blow that opens the girl's body. He stands in front of the girl, who is trying to catch her breath and gather her strength, saying that they have met again. Jacob takes Shanna on his shoulder and tries to take her with him, but Emmett decides to stop him by stabbing him in the back. He manages to hit the green-haired guy in the chest, causing him to fall to his knees in pain. He turns around and tells him to tell Edward to come to the boys' dorm or Shanna won't live long. Emmett starts shouting after him, but the guy with glasses tries to stop him, saying that this will attract more zombies. The guy gets up from his knees and says that they need to escape as soon as possible and find Edward. Trying to find shelter from zombies, they run into one of the empty classrooms of the school, closing the door and trying to barricade it. The guy with glasses starts shaking Emmett. They say that he doesn't know what to do next and death awaits them all. He explains to his friend that they don't have many options for further action, and they need to somehow get out and find Edward. Their safety is compromised as zombies begin to break through the windows right in the room. Emmett grabs one of the desks nearby, telling his friend that they will need to run on his signal. He shouts that they need to run, throwing the desk in his hands towards the crowd of infected. They begin to clear away the rubble to open the door, but stumble upon an even larger crowd of zombies. One of the corpse eaters rushes towards Emmett with the desire to tear him into pieces, and he, in turn, thinks that this is the last moment of his life. At the same second, several lightning-fast swings of the dagger occur, and all the zombies find themselves lying on the ground. In front of them is Edward standing with a calm expression, holding his dagger in his hand. Emmett is immensely happy at the appearance of the main character, thanking him for saving his life and the life of the guy with glasses. Our protagonist tries to analyze the situation by looking around the room and asking why they were left alone and where Shanna is now. Edward stands and listens to Emmett's hysterical chatter, trying to figure out and compare what happened. He once again explains to him how they met their classmates and teachers, and also that Jacob kidnapped Shanna. Standing in a panic, he also says that he should definitely come because otherwise he promised to kill her. It is also reported that Jacob managed to mutate, and only Edward is strong enough to compete with him. Our protagonist understands that the situation turned out exactly the way he expected when they left him in that very supermarket. He looks at Bella and understands that zombies can still have their own consciousness and character. Therefore, he needs to continue to evolve. Having collected my thoughts, thinking about a plan for further action, he wonders where Jacob went with Shanna. Emmett, with lingering panic, replies that he will be in the boys' dormitory and offers to take them there. He tries to hurry everyone present and suggests going faster while Shanna is still safe. Everyone present, without wasting any time, goes towards the men's dormitory and tells Michael not to lag behind them. Going outside, our heroes notice a crowd of zombies eating the body of another unfortunate victim. Michael is afraid to go straight through the crowd of zombies, among which there is a mutated one, and suggests taking a detour. Edward notes that zombies can evolve by eating the bodies of people or zombies, which means that over time, there will only be more of them. While our heroes are in thought, one of the corpse eaters notices them, and the entire crowd rushes into a fight with the survivors. Edward looks at Bella, nodding approvingly in her direction, realizing that they can easily deal with this bunch of zombies. Michael, meanwhile, squats down and shakes with fear, repeating the same phrase that it was better for them to take a detour. Meanwhile, our main character, gracefully wielding his dagger with the help of Bella, deals with his enemies. Emmett rejoices and turns out to be very inspired, realizing that everything will be fine with them. In a panic, Michael manages to notice that he does not see a mutant zombie who has disappeared somewhere. Everyone present, including Edward, froze in absolute silence, awaiting the attack of the mutated one. From the side of a nearby tree, a mutant zombie makes a sharp jerk towards our main character. His attempts to attack using the effect of surprise are broken by a powerful blow from Bella, who slams his head into a tree trunk. Watching everything that happens, Emmett thinks to himself that Jacob will pay for everything he has done. Having reached the men's dormitory building, Edward examines the fresh blood on the floor and walls. Emmett reports that this is definitely Jacob's blood because he was smeared with it from head to toe. Our heroes see a trail of blood going up the stairs, saying they can easily find them by going in that direction. Edward and his girlfriend move ahead, and Emmett tries to hurry up the lagging and out-of-breath Michael. Ultimately, following the bloody stains on the floor, they find themselves on one of the floors of the men's dormitory. At the end of the corridor, they see the silhouette of a man with shiny red eyes, who says that he has been waiting for them for a long time. The main character understands that standing in front of him is none other than Jacob, whose appearance makes it clear that he is no longer human. The mutant's face clearly shows a nasty grin and complete self-confidence that he will get the drivers out of this situation. Jacob scratches his festering and bleeding wounds, blaming Edward for the fact that it is his fault that he became this way. Meanwhile, Emmett manages to catch up with our protagonist while running, wondering where Jacob is. A moment later, he notices the disfigured face and body of his classmate with horror, not understanding what happened to him. The mutated one tears his skin from which pus begins to come out, once again accusing his friends that they are to blame for what happened. He points his finger at Edward and says that if they hadn't let this man in, they would have just returned to school, and he wouldn't have turned into a zombie. Our main character analyzes that ordinary people turn into zombies after infection. But something strange happens to Jacob, and he is clearly different from them. It seems that his body cannot withstand the defeat of a pure virus from a mutated zombie and begins to rot. Jacob points to his hand, saying that it was all Edward's fault and he could have helped him, but didn't. Our protagonist, with obvious dissatisfaction and anger, does not understand why he got the idea that everyone should take care of him and help him. He does not want to conduct a dialogue, asking the only question that interests him, where Shanna is now and in what condition she is. The mutated one immediately begins to scream at the top of his voice, saying that Edward left him to die, but now he can take revenge. Jacob replies that if he so badly wants to know where Shanna is now, then he should cut off the hand with which he hit him. Our main character looks at him with an arrogant gaze, realizing that his mutation has clouded Jacob's mind. Emmett immediately grabs a kitchen knife, offering to cut off his own hand in exchange for Shanna's life. Closing his eyes without the slightest hesitation, he swings the knife, intending to cut off his own hand in one motion. Edward manages to stop the boy, takes the knife from him, and tells him to stay away because he can handle everything himself. He asks his friend to calm down because the mutated one does not pose any threat to him because he is just a pathetic worm. Literally in 1 second, having made a sharp jerk towards Jacob, he finds himself behind his back, causing him to not feign surprise. After which he, using his dagger, inflicts a destructive and at the same time lightning-fast blow on the offender. Early turns out to be non-lethal, causing Jacob to grab his neck, not understanding why his opponent is so strong. Edward juggles a dagger. I note that I didn't expect that he would be able to dodge, and apparently the virus did not slightly increase his agility. He looks at him with an arrogant grin, realizing that the outcome of this battle was predetermined even before it began. After which, before Jacob's eyes, he seems to disappear, but in fact he moves at superhuman speed. Jacob immediately begins to look around and spin around in place, trying to catch our main character's gaze. A second later, Edward is right in front of the mutant's face and looks him straight in the eye. Emmett, watching the battle from the side, cannot believe his eyes, amazed at the speed with which our protagonist moves. Jacob's eyes begin to glow red, and his face literally begins to exude hatred and rage. He tries to make a blow while speaking so that Edward does not dare look down on him. At the same second, our main character, with a slight movement of his hand, manages to cut off the attacker's hand. He turns towards Jacob and says for the last time he asks where Shanna is now. Jacob continues to smirk, saying that although his opponent is strong, he will only find Shanna through his corpse. He begins to once again describe the situation in which he was left alone to rot in the basement of the store, describing his emotions. I don't want to listen to the ravings of an offended boy. Our main character cuts off his head in one motion, after which he turns towards Emmett and Michael, saying that Shanna needs to be found as soon as possible. While searching the offices on this floor, they come across a bound and chained Shanna. Without thinking twice, Edward hurries to help the poor girl and knocks down the door to the office where she is located. They pull the gag out of her mouth, trying to calm her down and telling her that everything is over and they will help her. Emmett begins to untie his friend while trying to find out if she is injured and if everything is okay with her. A tortured Shanna tries her best to say that they shouldn't try to help her. Our main character understands what happened and begins to bare his teeth, wondering how Jacob could do this. Shanna grabs her hand, pointing out the injury she received, and informs her that she is infected and will soon turn into a zombie. Everyone present looks at the poor girl, trying to understand what is happening and find a way out of the current situation. Emmett looks at Edward in hysterics, asking that this is just a prank and Shauna is just joking. Being hysterical, he begins to scream in horror, saying that this is impossible and she cannot be infected. Our protagonist decides to bring the green-haired guy to his senses by slapping him in the face and ordering him to calm down. Shauna sees a kitchen knife not far from her, and a very rash and thoughtless decision appears in her head. Edward understands that the concentration of the virus in Shanna's blood is much lower than Jacob's, and apparently she can still be saved. Well, all this will be possible only if Shanna turns out to be the same as Bella, because if her body rots, then she will no longer be saved. Edward understands that he cannot hesitate in the current situation and asks for help, namely to take Shanna to a safe place. At that moment, he extended his hand to the girl, trying to help her get up from her knees and follow them. Tears begin to appear on Shauna's face, and she asks to leave her because attempts to provide help will not be successful. She grabs the knife next to her, imagining it to her neck, and says that she would rather die than become a zombie. "I'm about to cut my artery." Bella manages to stop her by grabbing the knife blade with her bare hands. Then I throw it to the side and randomly hit the wall right next to Michael's head. Shauna begins to scream hysterically, asking why Bella stopped her and didn't give her the opportunity to die with honor. She looks at Edward standing next to her, fearing that she might infect both him and her friends. Shanna feels that she is slowly but surely beginning to turn into a zombie and experience severe pain, asking to be left alone. Emmett tries to get closer to his classmate by approaching her and asking what's going on. Edward manages to react, but there is not enough time just to tell him not to approach Shauna. A red glow begins to appear in the girl's eyes, and she immediately lunges towards her classmate. With a powerful blow of her hand, she sends Emmett flying, causing him to hit the nearest wall. The main character manages to notice that she has become much stronger and is most likely in the process of transformation. With the last of her strength, Shanna asks everyone present to leave because she is losing control over herself and her consciousness. After these last words, she falls to the ground unconscious, leaving everyone present in complete bewilderment. Emmett wonders what will happen next to his friend, whether she will transform like Jacob, and whether she can be saved. He notices that Shanna is still alive and tries to approach her, but Edward manages to stop him, telling him not to approach her. The girl gets to her feet with a calm face, and an ominous energy begins to be felt from her body. On her last legs of consciousness, she approaches our protagonist and asks him to hand them over. At that same second, he managed to react and knock Shanna onto her shoulder blades, pressing her to the ground. She sits on top of her, not giving her the opportunity to get up, and Edward asks not to harm her. Shanna continues to look towards our main character, trying to reach him with her hands, and once again asking him to give her something. I understand what they are most likely talking about. Edward takes out a bag of crystals from his pocket, asking if Shanna is talking about them. Seeing the contents of the package, the girl begins to try even harder to break free, begging him to give them to her. Edward notes that most likely her instincts tell her how to resist the transformation. Shauna grabs her head screaming in pain and is told that her head is going to explode. Realizing that there is no time to hesitate, the main character says that she can still be saved and asks Michael and Emmett to leave the room. Realizing that there is no time to hesitate, Michael grabs his friend's hand, leaving our trio alone and closing the door behind him. With the hope that this might have a positive effect, Edward takes out one of the crystals and puts it into Shauna's mouth. The girl's pain is clearly becoming less, and she grabs the main character's clothes, trying to tell him something. Shanna, with incredible lust on her face, extends her hand in his direction and asks him to give her more. Edward realizes that the crystals contain a pure virus and is perplexed as to how her body is still holding up. He looks at the girl writhing in pain, wondering if she can evolve like Bella. The main character decides to feed the girl another of the crystals he obtained, saying that there is no turning back and hopes that it will work. Having swallowed another crystal, Shanna immediately faints, but Bella manages to catch her and gently put her on the floor. At the same second, Michael bursts into the office and reports that a bunch of zombies are moving in their direction. The protagonist takes the situation into his own hands, saying that they are leaving now. They should pack their things and get out of here as soon as possible. They begin to make their way through the remaining corpse eaters in the school building and move towards the exit. She carries Shanna in her arms, and Edward gives orders and directs the group's further actions. I turn my attention to Michael. He is amazed that in the face of a threat, his body was able to release its full potential, and he keeps up with them. At the same moment, Emmett catches up with them, trying to catch his breath and holding Shauna's katana in his hand, which he could not leave here. There is a smile on his face, and he says that Shanna values her very much and it will be a shame to leave her there. Edward notices that Emmett is trying very hard for the sake of his classmate, and he, in turn, begins to make excuses and say that this is not connected with any feelings. The green-haired guy rubs his face with his hands, explaining that he simply values his friends very much, and without her help, he would have long ago turned into a zombie. The main character decides to support him, saying that he understands him perfectly, but now is not the time for chatting. They should leave. After some time, our heroes find themselves in one of the apartments of a multi-story building not far from the school they had just been to. Emmett, experiencing anxiety, once again asks if everything will be okay with his classmate. He looks at Shanna lying on Bella's lap and notices that she has been sleeping for quite some time. At the same moment, the girl regains consciousness and throws Bella away from her with a powerful blow. She stands tall with glowing red eyes, and a truly unimaginable aura emanates from her body. Edward covers the two defenseless guys with his body and tells them to leave immediately. He orders them to close the door and guard it from the outside and not to go inside under any circumstances. In the middle of a gloomy room stands Shanna, surrounded on both sides by Edward and his girlfriend. Saying her name, Edward notices that she reacts to him, which means she was able to retain part of her consciousness. I try to say her name one more time, and she immediately rushes towards him with furious rage on her face. At the last moment, our protagonist's reflexes allow him to dodge and avoid a powerful blow to the face. He considers a plan for further action and orders her to be pacified as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Emmett and Michael, standing outside the door, hear the sounds of blows and scuffles, wondering what is happening there. After the sounds fade away, Emmett decides to check what is happening there. But at the last moment, Michael manages to stop him. He approaches the door and through it asks Edward if everything is okay. Hearing in response that everything is under control, they should not go inside. Meanwhile, Bella holds Shanna pinned to the floor, waiting to see what her boyfriend will do next. The protagonist understands that if nothing is done, then eventually they will all suffer, and they need to try to establish a spiritual connection. Having touched the girl with his power, the rage in her eyes cools down for a while. Shanna looks around and asks what is going on here, not understanding how she ended up here. Edward is immediately surprised and incomprehensible as to how Shanna can speak. He comes closer to the girl, saying that Shanna is her name, while also wondering if she remembers anything. I'm trying to remember what happened to her the day before. Her head immediately begins to split with pain. The main character immediately orders his girlfriend to hold Shanna again, not allowing her to escape while at the same time trying to take control of her. A moment later, he is transported to the world of spirits and sees with his own eyes what state the girl's soul is in now. He sees Shanna next to whom there is a huge amount of energy particles hovering, and her soul is in a disordered state. He suggests that this is due to the merging of two personalities, which in theory can contact inside her body. Gathering all his strength, he tries to break through the disordered state of her soul and establish a connection with her. He makes a huge number of attempts to reach Shanna's original consciousness, experiencing a huge number of failures. Ultimately, his attempts were successful, and he managed to create a spiritual connection between himself and the girl. Having finished this procedure, he leans back on the bed and looks out that night has already fallen outside the window. Then they look at the two girls, realizing that he managed to take control of two mutated zombies at once. At that moment, Emmett bursts into the room and could no longer stand outside the door and just wait. He immediately runs up to Shanna, grabbing her by the shoulders and rejoicing that she didn't turn into one of the zombies. At the same second, the girl throws him to the side, swinging her hand and intending to finish him off. At the last moment, Edward manages to prevent an accident and orders the girl not to move. Stunned and not understanding what is happening, Emmett wonders what happened to his friend and why she behaves this way. The main character replies that this is a complication after infection within himself, realizing that his spiritual strength is only enough to control one of the girls. He also reports that it is better not to touch her for a while, or she will fall into madness. Edward decides to reassure Emmett by saying that at least she is not dead and has not become like Jacob. Looking at the main girl's face, the hero understands that if he did not have the ability to control zombies, she would have finished him off a long time ago. Without losing hope, Edward tries to talk to Shanna again, asking him if she recognizes him. Saying her name, Edward realizes that she is still reacting to him, and therefore some memories still remain in her head. Also, looking at Bella standing next to him, he realizes that they both retained pieces of their consciousness, and there is a chance to return them. After some time, Edward turns his attention to Shanna's katana, hoping that such a personal item could awaken some memories in her. The girl immediately snatches the katana from the hands of the main character, holding it tightly to herself. Convinced of her reaction, Edward tries to return the katana by taking it from the girl's hands. Shanna immediately crawls back, not giving our protagonist the opportunity to pick her up. I don't understand why this katana gave in to her so much. He tries to take it away again, but the girl manages to stop him with her foot, burying it in the face of our main character. The guy wipes the blood coming from his nose, agreeing that it's better to believe in something than to be a crazy Walking Dead man. After such a hard and eventful day, he only has enough strength to reach the wall and, together with Bella, leaning on each other, fall asleep like a baby. The next morning, our protagonist will be Michael, knocking on the door and saying that he has urgent news. Opening the door, he decides to listen to what happened and hears news from Michael that there are other survivors on the street. Deciding to check, he looks out the window and sees a group of people defending themselves from a horde of zombies coming towards them. One of the red-haired survivors gives commands to the first and second groups, ordering their further actions. Meanwhile, all the survivors follow his instructions and use improvised means to defend themselves from the Walking Dead. The commander himself also does not stand aside and, in parallel with managing a group of people, also fights off zombies. Edward, watching everything that happens, understands that this is a real team of survivors who act harmoniously and cover each other from the flanks. One of the people manages to make a hole in the bars, and the red-haired guy gives the order to immediately retreat. Our heroes, meanwhile, realize that a crowd of zombies is moving in their direction, as is a group of survivors. A horde of zombies chases people on the floors of the building, moving higher and higher up the stairs and trying to overtake their victims. The commander of the survivors decides to hide in one of the rooms and barricade himself. He understands that his people, including himself, have spent a lot of effort, and they won't be able to fight the corpse eaters endlessly. Edward assumes that these people want to rest for some time in this house and escape from the other side. He explains to Emmett how the buildings are located and where there are possible escape routes. I also inform him that he chose this house as a refuge for a reason, because from here it is easiest to get out. There is a loud cry outside the door asking for help, and Emmett asks Edward if they will stay to help the survivors. The protagonist reports that if they try to open the door, they will encounter several dozen infected people and will not be able to help them. They decide to get out of here as quickly as possible, and he takes a rope out of his backpack, saying that the window is the only way out. Before this, he orders Shauna and Bella to go forward and clear the way for them. At that very second, they rush out the window, and Emmett, stunned, manages to finally say that they are on the 4th floor. Without experiencing any difficulties, the girls descend to the ground using street air conditioners as support. Once on the ground, they both begin to deal with the zombies with unshakable confidence. Ordinary Walking Dead do not pose any threat or resistance to them, and they instantly deal with them. Meanwhile, Edward begins to slowly climb down, using a rope that turns out to be slightly shorter than necessary. He tells Emmett that whether or not to jump is their decision, and he will only wait for them for 2 minutes. Meanwhile, the door of the room in which they had been all this time is destroyed, and the infected begin to break into it. Michael, who has already begun to descend the rope, hurries Emmett, who clearly does not want to become lunch for them. Using all the accumulated adrenaline in his blood, the green-haired guy finally makes up his mind and jumps out of the window. Having successfully landed on our land, the protagonist orders everyone to immediately get up and get out of here because they don't have much time. Meanwhile, from the window of the very room from which they had just escaped, the corpses of the infected begin to fall. Edward manages to notice the rage in Shauna's eyes and realizes that she is once again getting out of control. He understands that now is not the right time for this and decides to strengthen control over the girl by bringing her to her senses. After which our heroes immediately begin to run away in the opposite direction from the crowd of infected. Moving towards the exit, Emmett manages to notice and points to those very survivors who are fighting the crowd of zombies. Edward sees the same group of survivors moving forward quite quickly. Our main character decides not to get involved in other conflicts and take a detour without participating in the fight. I'm trying to make my way through the alley and they come across another crowd of the Walking Dead. Without thinking twice, you realize that they need to break forward. He and the 2 girls begin to fight. Meanwhile, a group of survivors led by a red-haired captain finishes dealing with the remnants of the zombies. One of the survivors tells the captain that he saw someone fighting nearby. At this moment, our heroes continue to fight off countless corpse eaters. The captain of the group of survivors notices that our heroes are fighting quite well and decides to help them. Emmett notices survivors moving towards them, and Edward orders him not to be distracted. Through joint efforts, people quickly fight back against all those infected in the area. The red-haired guy notices that Edward is very strong and killed so many zombies without even being out of breath. He apologizes because he thinks that our heroes lived in this house, and they, along with their group, caused them so many problems. After which the captain invites Edward and his friends to proceed to their camp, which is located nearby. The main character understands that since Bella and Shauna became zombies, Emmett and Michael are a burden to him. Weighing the pros and cons, he realizes that the best decision would be to leave these 2 in the camp and continue on his way without them. The red-haired captain continues to insist that they go to their camp and meet their boss. Edward agrees, but before leaving, he takes a beret from his pocket and places it on Shanna's head. He explains this by saying that although she is now in a stable condition, it is better to disguise her. After some time, they reach the survivors' camp, on the ground floor of which there is a stronghold. The captain explains that they go on forays and shifts, and there are people in the camp who work and monitor the situation. Our heroes begin to move to the second floor, explaining that if something happens, they will be able to remove the stairs and the zombies will not get them. Having gone upstairs, they see in front of them a stately girl in a suit and glasses who is making some notes regarding the return of the second group. When Edward asks who this girl is, the red-haired guy replies that she records all the losses and gains associated with their teams. The girl continues to take notes, listing various essentials, food supplies, and additional supplies. The protagonist likes the atmosphere in this camp, and he admits that it is very good, like the person who was able to build it so quickly. Moving further and further along the floors of the building, they reach the office, the boss, who runs the camp. Entering the office, they see a man in a hood licking Chupa Chups who greets Captain Peter. Also, the person sitting in the chair reports that it took Peter 3 days to gather supplies, and she thought that he had already hung up his skates. The red-haired captain tries to make excuses, asking not to be angry with him and wanting to introduce his new acquaintances. The person in the chair turns out to be Anna, who is the manager of their camp. Anna and Peter begin to talk to each other about why the captain brought strangers to their camp. Decide to look at everyone Peter brought. A little girl in a green hood notices our main character and points her finger at him. Peter is surprised and asks Edward how Anna knows him, to which Edward replies that he has never seen her. Anna also notices Shanna standing nearby, who is her sister. Edward turns out to be very confused and hopes that the girl will remain calm and not get out of his control. After turning into a zombie, Jana still cannot speak, which in turn causes great aggression on Anna's part. Even though the girls are not on the warmest terms, Anna is slightly upset that her sister is not entirely happy to see her. The protagonist notices that the girl looks angry, but at the same time sad, and perhaps she is upset by Shanna's indifference. After her thoughts, Anna points in the direction of Bella and her boyfriend, asking who they are and why they came here. The girl looks at Edward very closely, wondering if they have met before. Our main character recalls his school days, suggesting that he was very ordinary and did not stand out much from the crowd. A moment later, continuing to examine Edward, Anna notices a dagger sticking out from behind his back. She points her finger at him and says that she remembered how this same guy stole her dagger from her store. The girl immediately begins to demand that the dagger be returned to her, to which Peter, standing nearby, also asks our hero to give it back. Edward is not going to give it up, which causes a storm of emotions on Anna's part. The main character explains that humanity has become the end, and anyone could enter the store and take it, especially since he risked his life and killed a bunch of mutated zombies to take it. The girl says that she doesn't care and this is her first dagger and let him immediately return it to her, to which in turn she receives another refusal. At that same second, a tall, white-haired and menacing man appears behind Peter and asks who Anna is quarreling with again. Edward notices that even though Anna looks angry on the outside, she is actually very kind and even personally went in search of Shanna. This white-haired man turns out to be the captain of the camp, who is very happy to see Edward, saying that he saw him kill mutated zombies. He is very happy about the coincidence that there was a guy in his camp, and even with Anna's sister, and also accompanied by another beauty. The man extends his hand with a smile, saying that he is always glad to see new survivors and asking them to call him Charlie. Edward shakes his hand, introducing himself to who he is and how he ended up in their camp. In his head, he wonders who Shanna is to him, now that he has her under control, who they are to each other. Edward says that Bella is his girlfriend, and Shanna are just friends, and the two guys behind him are her classmates. Anna immediately intervenes in their conversation, once again in hysterics, asking for her dagger to be returned to her. The protagonist explains that he is not going to give it up because he risked his life, and Charlie is trying to resolve the growing conflict. The camp captain orders Anna to calm down, saying that she should be happy to meet her sister, and they all need to talk in a calm atmosphere. They all sit down at the table in order to discuss further actions and not take the conversation into an aggressive direction. Edward begins to imitate the actor, saying that they were just living peacefully in their shelter, but because of Peter's command, they had to leave it. Meanwhile, Emmett, standing behind him, tries to argue that everything was different, but Michael manages to stop him. Charlie apologizes, saying that they will definitely do whatever Edward asks them to do. He explains that there are a lot of people in their camp with supplies. He does not need material compensation, but only this dagger. Charlie immediately joyfully says that he should keep it, which causes a stormy stream of aggression from Anna. In his head, the camp captain understands that giving a dagger to a person capable of single-handedly killing a mutated zombie is worth much more. After a few seconds, Anna decides to take the dagger from the main character on her own and tries to hit Edward, but gets hit in the hand. The protagonist looks at the girl menacingly, warning that he will not stand on ceremony with her despite his relationship with Shanna, and this is the last warning. Anna tells him not to stress over such a trifle, after which she decides that she needs to clear her head and goes for a walk. Charlie once again apologizes that it was their fault that they lost shelter and supplies and invites them to join their camp. Edward thanks for the offer, saying that he and the girls have a couple of unfinished matters and they will not be able to join them now. After which he reports that his friends Emmett and Michael will be happy to help and are ready to stay here. Michael immediately agrees to join the camp, realizing that he can no longer tag along with Edward, who is completely indifferent to him. Charlie is very happy with this pressure. They say that now he is one of us, and he will treat him like a member of the family. Emmett is clearly saddened by this outcome of events, but deep down he understands that he is a burden to Edward. But still, he also decides to agree to the captain's proposal, which brings a wide smile to his face. After resolving the issue with his classmates, Edward says that they will not be able to stay in the camp, even for one night, because they have urgent matters. Charlie agrees not to force them to stay and expresses his hope that they will meet again. Edward takes Bella with him, and Shanna tries to leave the camp as quickly as possible, and also says his final goodbyes. Moving along the exit, Emmett manages to catch up with him, shouting after him that he wants to say something. Edward turns around and asks what exactly he wanted in response to receiving a request from Emmett to take care of Shanna. He looks at the girl saying that even though she is now a zombie, she is unlikely to harm him, and he really hopes that Edward can bring her back to life. The main character puts his hand on the worried guy's shoulder, saying that he will definitely return his girlfriend to her previous state. Finally, Emmett enthusiastically promises to one day become stronger and surpass Edward. The main character agrees with this and then says goodbye, and in his head he thinks that it is better to live with hope in his heart than to be realistic and understand that they will not meet again. Anna watches them leave from the window, grinning and saying that she will return her dagger another time. Charlie tries to dissuade her from rash actions, but the girl forbids him to mind his own business. Meanwhile, our heroes set out on the city streets where a huge number of zombies are roaming. Bella, using her superhuman powers, literally tears apart infected people with her bare hands. Standing around the corner, Edward and Shanna understand that his girlfriend can handle such a small thing alone, since Shanna is very unstable. The protagonist is very afraid that he will once again lose control and the girl will fly into a rage. While he was in thought, he managed to gracefully and very elegantly kill all the zombies in the area. After some time, our heroes rise to one of the upper floors of a multi-story building. Edward looks at Bella's sweet face, realizing that she can hardly contain herself anymore. He locks the door, saying that they haven't eaten for several days, and it's time for them to feast on it. After making sure that they are safe, he begins to take zombie crystals out of his pocket, and someone's eyes sparkle behind him. It turns out that it rushes at Edward, knocking him to the floor and trying to take away all the crystals. He tries to calm the girls down by saying that they have killed enough zombies with food. Enough for everyone. Opening the package, he sees in front of him a large forked crystal, which slowly begins to absorb each other. Taking it in his hands, he suggests that stronger crystals can absorb weaker ones and then increase in size. The main character is overcome by severe pain and notices Shanna standing nearby with glowing red eyes. Shanna goes into a rage trying to break free of control in order to get the crystal. Since the crystals did not have time to merge into one, he manages to tear them in half, realizing that he has no choice left. He puts one half into Shanna's mouth, who immediately swallows it without the slightest hesitation. The girl is in severe pain and immediately begins to writhe and grabs her neck. Edward runs up to the girl, wondering if everything is okay with her and trying to find out what state she is in now. A blush is clearly visible on Shanna's face, and her eyes stop emitting hatred and aggression. After just a few seconds, the spiritual connection between Edward and Shanna begins to radiate into his body with strong streams of energy. The protagonist understands that it is necessary to calm her down as soon as possible and that she cannot be allowed to free herself from control. Grabbing Shanna's hand, he realizes that her skin is absolutely cold and has a red tint. After the waves stop attacking Edward's spiritual connection, Shanna loses consciousness and falls into his arms. He, the main character, is very glad that everything worked out, and the girl could not break out of control, after which he takes her in his arms and lays her on the nearby sofa. Looking at the sleeping Shanna, he suggests how she will be able to evolve and what will happen to her in the future. Leaving Shanna to rest, Edward gives the other half of the crystal to Bella, hoping that his spiritual connection will strengthen after their evolution. Watching Bella swallow the crystal, He hopes that he will be strong enough to withstand another stream of energy waves, since the crystals are much stronger than the previous ones. Having swallowed the crystal, the girl begins to feel hot. Sweat appears all over her body, and a slight blush appears on her face. Just a few moments later, Bella's eyes light up with a bright flame, and Edward begins to feel a strong thirst for blood. He is amazed at how hard he has to resist in order not to lose control of Bella. He looks at his hands, amazed at how much the thirst for blood and destruction has grown inside his girlfriend's soul. The protagonist's body experiences incredible pain, and the feeling he experiences begins to slowly consume him. He looks into the eyes of his girlfriend, realizing that she wants to suppress him and break off the connection with him. Edward realizes that he is beginning to lose control of his body and that of his girlfriend and turn into a zombie. With the last of his strength, our main character is trying to control himself. Otherwise, it will be impossible to reverse the transformation. He understands that he needs to find a way out of this situation as soon as possible and somehow distract himself. Without thinking twice, he runs up to his girlfriend, hugging her and pressing her to his body. Asking forgiveness for what he is about to do, he gently lifts Bella's head and merges with her in a passionate kiss. After the kiss, he looks at the beautiful face of his girlfriend, in whose eyes a real feeling of love can be seen. Without trying to restrain himself and losing control, Edward throws Bella to the floor and continues his passionate kisses. After some time, both lovers lie on the floor looking at each other, trying to catch their breath. Looking at his girlfriend, he says that it doesn't matter how other people treat her and what they think about her, because she will forever remain the only one in his heart. At that very second, he is struck by the idea that the virus, when infected, spreads through the blood, and perhaps saliva can also turn people into zombies. Looking at his girlfriend and realizing that she had just eaten a pure crystal of the virus, he voluntarily contacted him directly. You understand that if he turns, then Bella and Shauna will get out of control, and then the chances of continuing a normal life will be zero. He hugs with Bella, realizing that the long-awaited first kiss turned out to determine his fate. Edward realizes that 10 minutes have passed, and his body temperature is very high, but he is still conscious. Jacob remembers he realizes that he and Shauna also remained in the consciousness of assuming that he would rot until his death. Lying on his girlfriend's chest, he looks at the ceiling, philosophizing that becoming a zombie is not so bad. He hugs Bella tightly and says that at least she stayed by his side instead of becoming a bloodthirsty lunatic. Looking into the eyes of his girlfriend, he hopes that if he does become a zombie, he will be able to retain at least a piece of his consciousness. The clock continues to tick, and Edward is surprised that more than 20 minutes have passed, but nothing has happened. Realizing this, he boldly makes the assumption that saliva is not infectious and does not transmit the virus. His concern changes to a smile on his face, and he says that he needs a lot more kisses to calm down. He understands that as long as he doesn't touch her blood, everything will be fine, even if they go a little further than kissing. Thinking about this, Bella puts her hand on Edward's face, causing him incredible surprise. He grabs her by the shoulders, trying to understand how this happened because he did not give the order to touch him, which means she did it of her own free will. Edward is glad that the crystals are helping to more slowly return grains of her consciousness. Edward also decides to check whether Bela has become stronger after evolution, and decides what he can come up with. He picks up a coin and orders the girl to catch it as quickly as possible before it falls to the floor. Throwing a coin into the air, he managed to grab it in the blink of an eye before it had time to reach its maximum speed. The protagonist decides not to stand on ceremony and throws 4 coins into the air at once. He managed to catch 2 of them in his hands and hit the last 2 upwards with his legs. Looking at his girlfriend, he is amazed at her speed and agility, comparing her to a wild leopard. He understands that Bella's evolution is closely related to his own body, and therefore he has also evolved. With a smile on his face and incredible excitement, he decides to try it as soon as possible. Not yet accustomed to controlling his body after evolution, he stumbles from too high a speed and begins to fall. He sees the sofa in front of him, on which Shanna is lying, and tries with all his might to stay on his feet and not fly into it with all his might. Having failed, he still hits the sofa, falling to the ground and trying to get up, hoping that at least he didn't get hurt. I try to lean on the ground and get to my feet, but my hand bumps into something soft and pleasant. He looks at Shauna, rejoicing that she is a zombie, because if she were a human, she would have already cut off his hand. The girl looks away at the same time, feeling embarrassed, and also calling Edward a pervert. Edward understands that he is not acting entirely correctly, but is surprised that Shanna is talking again. His thoughts are torn between the fact that he just touched the girl's breasts and the fact that she just spoke. Shanna looks at Edward with innocent eyes, trying to say some words and assuming that she knows him. Edward removes his hand from her chest, hoping that her consciousness has returned to its previous course. At that same second, Shauna's eyes light up red again, and she again begins to lose control of herself. The main character suggests that the instinct of self-defense to some extent can awaken her consciousness. Edward decides to experiment and, with a grin on his face, asks Shauna if he can touch her breasts again. The girl immediately begins to shake her head in different directions, trying to show her dissatisfaction, but there is no need for it to come out of her mouth. The protagonist decides not to slow down, hanging over her body and offering to do this 2, and maybe 3 times. Not hearing a negative response from Shauna, he begins to slowly move his hand closer to her breast. At the last moment, the girl loudly shouts "Stop," and her eyes light up red. Edward decides to stop his attacks, realizing that he may have gone a little too far, and this is unnecessary. After a short time, the girl's eye color becomes the same, and she slowly returns to normal. Edward understands that they managed to do quite a lot today. Both girls were able to evolve, just like himself. He thinks about how he can take a little break and celebrate this event. After some time, he decides to wash over this event and seats Bella and Shauna not far from him. He takes out some beer from his supplies and begins to empty one of the cans with incredible thirst. He decides to completely empty his reserves, saying that today he is immensely happy. He looks at the girls and they say that, although their consciousness cleared up for a very short time, it was more than enough. He hopes that if things continue to progress at the same speed, they will both be fully restored soon. Although this event is a good sign, Edward is much more concerned about the fact that he has become stronger and more resilient. You understand that the alcohol has gone to his head. He decides to open the window and get some fresh air. Not far from his shelter in one of the neighboring houses, he hears strange sounds. He realizes that no one has entered the building, and the sounds can only come from another person. He sees a little girl with blue hair in a maid costume in front of him and assumes that she was a survivor who turned into a zombie. Edward's face shows incredible surprise as he watches this girl begin to attack other zombies. In his head, he thinks that even zombies are sure that a dark, windy night is the best time to kill. I'm trying to analyze the situation and understand why this girl, being a zombie, attacks her relatives. He assumes that she is under someone's control. Even with a huge number of wounds on her body, the maid girl continues to fight the walking dead. Complete turmoil begins to happen around as the wounds and blood of other zombies begin to attract even more corpse eaters, turning into a real mess. Edward notices that the maid girl is much stronger than other zombies, and even with a huge number of wounds, she continues to fight back. He notices that the zombie girl practically does not hit the head, and this can be done in order to get the crystals. After some time, the maid girl is unable to continue to fight back and is attacked from behind by another zombie. She receives a mortal wound and, falling to her knees, realizes that she can no longer continue to fight. Edward watches everything that happens with a grin, trying to find human habits in the behavior of those infected with the virus. As I'm about to finish watching, he turns around and sees Shanna standing next to him behind him. He assumes that her smell of blood or this situation somehow influenced her. Using his spiritual connection, he senses an incredible lust for murder emanating from Shauna. Meanwhile, one of the surviving zombies begins to slowly evolve before our hero's eyes. After a short period of time, his body has gained a significant amount of muscle, and incredible confidence is visible on his face. Edward continues to monitor the development of the situation, realizing that the mutated zombie is beginning to attract weaker individuals. He decides to give the girl a chance to grab that zombie and drag her here for research. Looking at Shauna, he understands that she is too unstable and could very well get out of control. He orders them to go there and quickly completely sort it out and bring him the body of a mutated zombie. Meanwhile, the mutant continues to deal with the crowd of ordinary zombies attacking him. Edward manages to notice that the mutated zombie, in turn, begins to eat only those places where the crystals are located. He gives an order to Bella, and at that very second, she finds herself behind the zombie, about to finish him off with one blow. Using his physical skills, and with one movement of his hand, he sends a zombie into a deep knockout. Our heroes tie the mutant's body with ropes to the table, intending to begin studying it up and down. Edward takes the dagger into his hands, intending to begin an autopsy and study of what is happening with the body of the infected. The girls, under the leadership of Edward, assist him and help him hold the objects at hand. After some time during the autopsy, Edward pulls out an incomprehensible clot of green threads from the zombie's body. He concludes that similar thread-like matter has spread throughout almost the entire body of the zombie, especially in the brain. Deciding to make additional assumptions regarding the given substance, he decides to smell it and finds out that the smell is similar to a crystal. This thought leads him to a possible hypothesis regarding the structure of the zombie body, and he continues to perform an autopsy. He takes out a small crystal from the zombie's body, from which threads stick out, realizing that every zombie has something similar. but the virus is so small that the crystal cannot be seen. This conclusion provides an answer to why other zombies begin to eat their relatives. They want to get even more virus and mutate. I remember the fused crystal. He understands that inside each zombie there is his own, but its parts are distributed throughout the body and gradually merge into a single whole. Looking at the girls, he suggests that one day the crystal will become so small that the zombie will be able to regain its consciousness. Shauna had little of the virus in her body, and she ate 3 crystals before it spread to her brain. The main character believes that all his conclusions are most likely correct, and that Bella will soon be able to restore her consciousness. At this moment, he turns to Shanna's voice, who asks why he is smiling. He replies that he remembered the time when he touched her breasts, and in his opinion, they are still too small. The protagonist realizes that further dissection is pointless and orders his girls to throw it away. Bella and Shauna take the bloody zombie corpse and throw it out the window. After some time, realizing that they are all dirty after the latest events, they go to a clothing store. Before they can open the store door from the inside, a crowd of walking dead rushes at them. Using his power, Edward manages to take control of all the infected present, after which the girls in the blink of an eye manage to deal with all the zombies standing in their way. Edward takes Bella's hand and takes her to the locker room to help her change clothes since she can't handle it herself. A few minutes later, the girl comes out in a new, beautiful snow-white dress that emphasizes her figure. After this, the main character notices how Shanna has already begun to choose a dress for herself, and apparently, her consciousness is returning faster than he expected. He looks at the red, traditional dress, sleeveless, which the girl chose. They say that it is not suitable because it is too noticeable. Imagining her in this dress, he thinks that it is not so important if she wears it when they are alone. Edward rummages through the store shelves trying to find a more suitable outfit for the girl and hands her one of the options. He also remembers that, apparently, Shanna will not be able to change clothes herself and goes to help. After some time, the girl finds herself dressed in a beautiful black dress, and artificial cat ears can be seen on her head. Edward smiles maliciously, admitting to himself that he has excellent taste. Just as I'm about to leave for the store, he stops abruptly and notices a group of people outside. These people turn out to be Michael, Peter, and Anna, who are closely looking at the corpse of a zombie. Looking at the captain's bloody axe, he understands that they risked themselves a lot to come here. But for what? She continues to examine the infected, trying to find traces of their murder. The girl asks Michael if Edward is really as strong as he described, receiving in response that this is the pure truth. She says that she will understand whether Michael is an enemy or not when they find the main character. Peter says that they could already leave here, to which Anna objects that she must deal with him today. The captain is cautious, suggesting that even if they find him, he is too strong for them. The girl begins to scream and orders not to whine because Edward was not able to kill them all alone. She suggests that all of Edward's strength lies in Shanna, who will leave him as soon as he sees her. Anna declares that it doesn't matter how they have to catch him today and rushes forward. I watch everything that happens from a safe place. Edward does not understand how a simple dagger could agitate the girl so much. He smirks, saying that she has set herself the impossible task of finding him in such a big city. He gives the order to use deft movements of his body to climb onto the roof of the building to inspect the area. He sees the trio of survivors heading straight towards him at very fast speed. Edward assumes that Anna knows his approximate location, but does not know where he is exactly. I'm trying to run away and somewhere to hide. He stumbles upon a computer club. Going inside, he meets a number of infected people and decides to make his way further to the upper floors. Meanwhile, Anna, accompanied by 2 guys, is already very close to his hideout. At the same second, another infected person bursts into the room in which Edward is conducting surveillance. He immediately decides to take it under his personal control, deciding to teach the persistent girl a lesson as soon as possible. He sends a zombie under control to attack Anna, but she manages to dodge at the last moment. The girl is perplexed, trying to understand how the infected man set up an ambush and managed to use a weapon. Hoping to finish off the attacker with one blow, she grabs her dagger, but while trying to strike, she misses. This causes even more shock to everyone present, since ordinary zombies are not capable of moving in this way. After which the puppet tries to make another attack, which Anna manages to block, but realizes that the zombie is very strong. Peter takes out his axe and immediately rushes to help the girl, while Michael, meanwhile, squats and shakes with fear. While Anna and Peter are busy fighting with the puppet, another zombie's hand manages to cover Michael's mouth and grab him. Trying to combine my attacks, the girl manages to cut off 4 fingers of the infected man and knock the weapon out of his hands, giving the captain the opportunity to attack. At the last moment, Edward's puppet manages to dodge to the side and survive, after which the zombie retreats and goes into an alley, leaving Peter and Anna even more bewildered. He tries to lure them with him, which causes aggression and rage in the girl. after which they both remember that they left Michael alone, but turn around and notice that he is missing. Peter suggests that he could run away, but Anna says that most likely he could go over to Edward. These conclusions tell her that our protagonist is most likely located somewhere nearby. She remembers once again that that zombie behaved too strangely, and they don't know how many there are in total. She tells Peter that first they need to deal with the very zombie that attacked them. The guy says that she should forget about it and need to go to the camp because apparently the zombies that attacked them were intelligent, and they are not ready for this. Anna says to get out of the way if he doesn't want to go with her. She will be alone, and let him wait for her here. Peter bends down to tie his shoelaces, and at that moment the silhouette of another zombie appears behind him. Observing everything that is happening, Edward, who continues to control the situation, understands that he has successfully separated all the survivors, and now Anna is left alone. He understands that she will very soon be near her location and is preparing to teach her a lesson. The girl hears a noise in one of the rooms and decides to go in and check where the sounds are coming from. She gets upset that it was just the wind that knocked over the cup and leaves. A moment later, a door slams behind her, which worries her very much because ordinary zombies do not know how to close them. At this second, the same infected with whom she fought a few minutes ago jumps out from an ambush at her. He manages to attack the girl and knock her to the ground, and she prepares to finish him off with her dagger. Another zombie manages to grab her hand, leaving the defenseless girl in a hopeless situation. In her thoughts, Anna is already preparing for death, realizing that she will be eaten alive. The girl is surprised, not understanding what is happening, as one of the zombies puts her on her stomach on his knee, and the second one standing behind her begins to spank her buttocks with all his might. But she continues to not understand what is happening and frantically begins to beg for mercy. Meanwhile, the second zombie who holds her on his knee tries to kiss her. The girl begins to sob and cry, praying that she does not want to be raped. After some time, Anna loses consciousness, and Edward decides to stop bullying her. He takes her to a safe place and tries to revive her when you talk to her. Having come to her senses, Anna immediately begins to scream at the top of her voice, asking to be left alone. She notices Edward standing in front of her and asks how he ended up here and where the zombies who beat her went. She also asks if he saw anyone else from her squad and why he saved her. Edward replies that the girl screamed like crazy and he no longer had a choice, which makes her angry. When Edward asks that she doesn't even want to thank him, Anna says that as a sign of gratitude, he can keep the dagger. Edward asks that for her, her life is worth exactly the same as a piece of metal. Anna says that she has nothing more to offer in return and tries to find her own blade in her bosom. Edward takes it out of his pocket and points out that it is not up to her to decide how to dispose of his things. She starts jumping in front of Edward's face just to give her back her property. The girl also tries to appeal to her sister, asking how she allows him to treat her like this. Edward immediately stands up for Shauna, telling her not to touch her and watch her mouth because she has no right to accuse her. And she orders him not to shout at him because he has no right to do so, even taking into account that he saved her. At that very second, Edward decides to calm the hysterical girl by slapping her in the face. The main character orders her to watch her language, because if she were not Shanna's sister, he would have long ago left her to be torn to pieces by the infected. When the girl asks who gave him the right to beat her, Edward replies that the right of force gives him the opportunity to do what he wants. He explains that in their world, the stronger you are, the more power you have, and it depends on his desire whether to recognize Anna as his friend or not. He holds her face looking straight into her eyes and says that he is not a villain, but if someone is trying so hard to get to the bottom of him, he will not tolerate it. Anna says he shouldn't do things like that to her, and Edward grins and says he's not interested in punts. After this, he decides to ask the girl how she was able to find him. Edward also insists that she not try to lie about the bugs and other things, because he managed to check everything, and if she continues to hide something, he will leave her to be eaten by zombies. Anna says that he won't believe her anyway, but still decides to say that she has superpowers. Edward is surprised by the information he heard about Anna having superpowers. He comes to terms with his assumptions that he is not the only one with powers in this world. Looking at this small and defenseless girl, Edward could not even imagine that she had superpowers. The main character immediately decides to find out exactly what power Anna has, surprising her with his confidence that she has not gone crazy. He demands an answer from the girl, and Anna explains that she can connect people with herself. She is able to put a mark on any surface, and with this mark, she will establish a connection, which is how she found him. Edward understands that time in the camp, she hit him not just like that, but in order to put a mark. The girl manages to correct him, saying that her mark does not last too long and she took assistance with her. She makes a pitiful face. They say that no matter how much she uses it, she does not improve. after which she asks to let her go because she told everything she knows and promises not to cause any more problems. Edward grins haughtily, trying to persuade Anna to beg him to let her go. The girl is clearly not going to bend to the main character, and she answers with aggression that she is not going to beg him. She understands that he is most likely mocking her, but at the last moment she looks at her sister and decides to succumb to the trick. Anna decides to make a cute face and says, "Forgive me, brother, for this behavior." Edward puts his hand on her shoulder and also asks for forgiveness for his behavior, saying that this is the last warning. He also adds that next time he will not be so gentle and kind and hopes that this will not happen again. As he leaves, he turns around and tells Anna to remember this moment and not to piss him off anymore, because there will be no second chance. Anna watches Edward leave in the company of girls and thinks that she can't just let him go. At the last moment, she manages to call out to her sister Shanna, asking her to stay for a few moments. She hands her something very small green. They say it is a gift from her grandfather. The main character notices this and tries to find out what she is doing. The girl hurries to leave as soon as possible and say goodbye. Edward approaches Shanna and notices that Anna has hung a small, excellent quality jade pendant around her neck. He grins, realizing that she came not only for her dagger, but was also apparently embarrassed by her true intentions, wanting to give a gift. His thoughts are interrupted by Shanna, who tugs on his jacket sleeve and asks why he wanted to kill Anna, since through their spiritual connection, she was able to sense his desire and intention. Looking at Shanna, he thinks that he really wanted to kill Anna. But at the last moment, he realized that this was probably her only living relative, and therefore did not do it. With his characteristic calm manner of speech, he explains that because they are sisters, he would not be able to do this. Shanna replies that she doesn't understand if he kills her, and she will be very sad, because it seems so to her. Edward tries to calm her down by saying that in the end they're relatives, and they have no one else in this world. He also clarifies that she should have remembered her sister. Otherwise, she would not have let her get so close to her, not to mention letting her hang a pendant around her neck. Ashana holds her head, saying that she really recognized her, and that besides this, a huge number of memories are spinning in her head. Edward takes her hands, telling her not to worry about it, because soon she will remember everything and be able to become her former self. The girl thinks for a second, and then tells him that she doesn't want to become the same Shanna. She adds that she and the White One are the same, and they don't want to remember their past. She takes Edward by the cheek and says that he is not one of us, and he is special as he should be. The main character smiles, saying that only he can pinch someone's cheeks, and next time she should show her affection differently. After which he grabs the girl by the waist, pulling her towards him, and gently merges with her in a kiss. They stand absolutely still for some time, enjoying the closeness and romance of this moment. After the kiss ends, Shanna tries to describe her thoughts, saying that she finds it a little strange and finds it difficult to describe her feelings. The main character replies that he was just showing her how to do it, and next time she can take the initiative. Shanna begins to get closer to Edward again, offering to do it one more time and commit it to memory. All this is observed from the side by Bella, who watches with a straight face as Edward directs Shanna to move her tongue. A few moments later, their kiss ends, and the girl's face shows slight embarrassment. Immediately after this, Bella runs up to Edward, hugs him around the neck, and also tenderly merges with him in a kiss. At the same moment, our protagonist's heart begins to beat with incredible speed and purity. Edward grabs his chest with his hand, experiencing severe pain, realizing that this feeling is similar to when he first kissed Bella. Looking at the way Shanna wipes her lips, he assumes that her saliva has exactly the same effect. All this time he assumed that the saliva of zombie girls was poisonous, but on the contrary, it was useful and acted as a stimulant. He hugs Bella and Shanna and smilingly says that his zombie girls are a real treasure. After this, he remembers that he left Peter tied up in one of the rooms, and after he comes to his senses, he can easily get out. Well, he's not going to just let Michael go because his assumption that he will keep a low profile has collapsed, and besides, he knows too much. He breaks the spiritual connection with the zombie who is guarding Michael, realizing that his days will be numbered. Edward understands that today he killed a person for the first time, although not with his own hands, because if he doesn't do this, Michael will cause too many problems. The main character looks at the girls and ponders his further path to the campus, where they will go tomorrow. Our heroes have spent too much time and effort and decide to find a place to rest and spend the night. The protagonist, in a company of girls, sits at a table in a makeshift shelter and holds a bowl of freshly brewed noodles in his hands. He remembers, looking at her, that from the very beginning of the apocalypse he ate noodles only in dry form, and it was a luxury for him to brew them. Not intending to hesitate, he picks up his chopsticks and begins the meal with incredible pleasure. He also remembers that before the apocalypse, He didn't really need anything, but he was rarely satisfied with his life, and now only noodles are enough to be happy. In the modern world, everyone cares only about their own survival, and Edward's goal is to restore Bella and Shanna's sanity. Looking at Shanna at this moment, he notices that her combat power has increased many times, as well as her sword skills. The main character also remembers the very dagger that he took from Anna and decides to give it to Bella. He puts the blade in her tender feminine hands while hugging her from behind and asks her to try it on herself. Using her physical skills and acquired weapons, Bella destroys one of the entrance doors with several lightning-fast swings. Looking at her, Edward is even more delighted and realizes that his girlfriend's combat power has also increased significantly with the use of weapons. He hugs Bella in a very joyful and inspired mood and offers to celebrate this event, after which all our heroes go to bed in order to have a good rest and move on with new strength. The next morning, Edward wakes up to two girls staring at his sleeping body. When he asks what exactly they were doing, Shanna replies that she really wanted to bite him. She also explains that Bella also wanted to do this, but doubted her desires. The main character wipes the sweat from his forehead, glad that he woke up early enough that they didn't have time to bite him in his sleep. Having collected all his things, Edward goes to the roof of the building, saying that today they have to collect supplies. He uses his spiritual connection and takes control of several weak zombies, sending them to collect food at a nearby store. He also sends one of them to get a box of bottled water, assuming that this will be too much, but it is better to take it in reserve. Keeping Bella and Shanna under control, he realizes that 3 more weak zombies is the limit for him, and he needs to get more crystals for evolution. He also sends another infected person on reconnaissance, remembering that there should be a shopping center in that direction. His assumption is supported by dreams, and the zombie scout reaches a huge shopping center, which is clearly filled with a horde of zombies. Having collected all their supplies, they go to that same shopping center and go around it from the back entrance. Edward carefully plans all his actions, realizing that at the beginning of the epidemic, people were rushing to the exit, so most of the infected will end up on the first and second floors. He also understands that the staff area will be much safer, but he still needs to keep his eyes open. The main character orders Bella to go forward and Shanna to cover their group from behind and be extremely careful. Our heroes begin to move and make their way inside the building, slowly but surely reaching the 3rd floor and not meeting a single infected person on their way. Edward suspects that something wrong is going on because there is not the slightest reaction from Bella and Shanna. Moving further into the building, our heroes still come across a number of infected people and decide not to attract too much attention. The main character remembers that mainly on the 3rd floor they sold clothes, and in the center there is a supermarket, and most likely there is something interesting there. Our heroes move further and further into the shopping center, hoping that they will meet mutated individuals on their way. At some point, Shanna stops and wants to ask Edward a question that worries her, because it seems to her that something is wrong. At that same second, someone suddenly grabs the girl from around the corner and drags her away with him. Edward, accompanied by Bella, immediately rushes after the attacker in order to save Shanna. Meanwhile, the girl finds herself pinned to the floor trying to defend herself with her katana. Apparently, one of the mutated zombies in the mall who attacked her is baring her teeth with the desire to tear her apart. A few moments later, the door opens and an alarmed Edward rushes into the room, running to her rescue. Taking advantage of a second of confusion, Shanna manages to throw the infected away from herself with a powerful kick. He decides not to waste the opportunity, and while the zombies are in the air, finish him off with one blow. At the last moment, while in flight, the mutated one manages to dodge and avoid inevitable death. Edward immediately notices that she is not the ordinary infected he met earlier, because none of them could dodge attacks. He immediately orders the girls to step back, realizing that they need to be as careful as possible because this zombie is the most dangerous. The 3 of them slowly and carefully try to drive the attacker into a corner and deal with her with minimal losses. The main character understands that she is much smarter and stronger than other mutated ones and is already an advanced zombie. The infected, realizing that they are going to drive her into a corner, begins to drink furiously and her eyes fill with rage. Using her physical abilities, she tries to escape, realizing that the numerical advantage will not work in her favor. Shanna immediately manages to react to her attempt to escape and tries to strike with a katana, which the infected immediately manages to block. At this point, Edward tries to confuse the attacker by trying to take control of her with his spiritual power. The level of his evolution turns out to be completely insufficient for such manipulations, and the attempt is unsuccessful. The main character manages to feel his weakness with his whole body, since the rupture of spiritual energy occurs very quickly. The mutated girl clearly doesn't like this, and she immediately rushes towards Edward with the desire to tear him to pieces. Its speed clearly exceeds the reflexes of our protagonist, and without having time to react, he is pressed into the ground. The zombie reaches its mouth towards Edward's face with the desire to tear off a tasty piece of flesh from him. Trying with all my might to defend myself from the attack, the main character manages to grab the attacker by the throat, after which, with a powerful blow of his right hand, he hits her in the face, causing the mutated woman to lose several teeth. At this moment, rage takes over the zombie's mind even more, and she begins to control both of Edward's hands. In outbursts of anger, she squeezes our main character's shoulder with all her might, causing bones to crunch. Screaming in pain, the protagonist immediately orders the girls not to hesitate and to deal with the attacker as soon as possible. Bella and Shauna at that very second find themselves behind the zombies, about to deliver the decisive blow. In an instant, both of the mutated zombies' arms are severed and sent flying. Apparently, the infected woman did not even have time to realize what had happened and simply begins to scream in rage. At the same moment, the freed protagonist manages to throw her off with a kick. Holding his shattered shoulder with his hand, he orders her to be finished off as quickly as possible. Several lightning-fast swings of the blades leave the lifeless body of the mutated one lying on the floor. Our heroes understand that because of the noise that has arisen, a crowd of ordinary infected people is already moving in their direction. After remembering to take the crystal, they decide that now is the time to retreat and recuperate. Having got out of the building, the girls help the wounded Edward get to the nearest shelter as quickly as possible. Having reached a safe place, the main character groans in pain and asks to be more gentle with him. Realizing that Shauna is not good at bandaging wounds, he asks Bella to do this. Edward suggests that his control over her is too weak and Shanna's bandages are too tight and may only cause more bruises. Remembering his last fight, he suggests that that girl was stronger than Bella and Shauna combined. Looking at Shanna, he thinks that if they both become advanced zombies, it will be amazing. His thoughts are interrupted by another crack of his own bones because he has weakened his control over Bella. Edward immediately manages to make a funny grimace and realizes that he cannot be distracted even for a second. Having finished binding our wounds, the heroes decide to think about a plan for their further actions. The protagonist decides that now is the right time to divide the crystal they have mined between the girls. Before dividing the crystal at the last moment, Edward decides to smell it, and it turns out that he thinks it tastes good. Remembering his past experiences, it seemed to him that the crystals smelled bad, and that now, in addition to the opposite, he wanted to eat them. He assumes that the girl's thoughts influenced his consciousness because for an ordinary person, such behavior is very strange. The main character breaks the resulting crystal in half and decides to give each of the girls one half. Shanna decides to give the more concentrated part of the crystal to Bella and puts it in her mouth. After absorbing the crystal, a wave of energy and pleasure begins to cover the girls. After some time, joy and pleasure are replaced by a fit of wild aggression, and their eyes light up bright red. At this moment, the protagonist realizes that they are both beginning to evolve and need to be on their guard. Using my spiritual power, he feels that this crystal is much stronger than those that were before, and that they cannot be allowed to take control. This time, the evolutionary processes took much longer than before, and at least 3 days passed. After this time, Edward calmly exhales, glad that everything happened without unnecessary complications. His joyful rejoicing is interrupted by Shanna, who suddenly says that she remembered something. What he heard evokes surprise and hope on the protagonist's face that the girl's memory has returned. Shanna points her finger at him and says that she remembered how he pestered her some time ago. She describes how he touched her breasts, took off her clothes, and groped her under the pretext of bathing. Edward, who clearly did not expect such a reaction, hoped that, having regained his sanity, the first thing he would do would be to pay and thank him for saving his life. Looking into his eyes, Shanna adds that she thinks that in the human world, this is called harassment. Decide to change the topic. The main character decides to clarify whether she remembered anything else about her past life. With a saddened look, the girl replies that it seems to her that she must have a huge number of memories, but her whole mind is as if in a fog. The protagonist understands that she only remembered what happened after her infection, but does not remember everything that happened before that. Shauna tries to console Edward by saying that she is happy with everything, and the state of things is not as sad as it could be. He grins, saying that her recovery is in full swing, and now she is even able to understand emotions. Having collected all their things, our heroes move on because their goal lies in the campus. After some time, our heroes find themselves in a picturesque area decorated with a huge number of neon signs. Edward realizes that the college town is located at the opposite end of the street and decides to send a small zombie to investigate. He sends the zombies forward, and he decides to explore the surroundings, amazed at the number of corpses that are located here. At this moment, Shanna interrupts him and asks why he doesn't like this smell. The main character turns around and sees sincere surprise and misunderstanding of what is happening on her face. He turns out to be quite dumbfounded by such a question, not understanding how to explain to zombies that an ordinary person cannot like the smell of rotting bodies. Jana says that she likes this smell, but if anything, she can pretend as if she doesn't like it. Edward grabs his head, asking higher powers what is going on in women's heads. The protagonist puts his hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her down and telling her not to think about such complex and deep things. He also points out that it doesn't matter to him whether Shauna likes something or not. The girl thanks him for such kindness. You notice that sometimes she really wants to bite him, wondering if this is normal. Meanwhile, their conversation is interrupted by the fact that the main character feels like the connection between him and the zombie scout has been broken. Edward says that he did not break control of the zombie on his own, and therefore someone most likely killed him. Looking through the eyes of a zombie scout just a few minutes earlier, we see how he made it to the karaoke bar. After which unexpected ambushes, someone hit him on the head with a blunt, heavy object. Looking at the girls, Edward realizes that their inner instinct also did not detect anything, which means it was most likely a person. Taking out his dagger from his bosom, he decides to go to that very place as soon as possible and check what happened. Having reached that very place, he discovers the corpse of a zombie scout, realizing that his assumptions have come true. At that same second, Bella begins to feel something strange and, looking deeper into the building, realizes that something is definitely wrong here. Edward decides to use his spiritual power and take one of the zombies on the street as bait. Having taken control of one infected, he sends it as bait and decides to ambush it himself. Using his puppet, he begins to destroy and smash everything around in an attempt to attract attention. After some time of unsuccessful attempts, he realizes that the zombie has made so much noise, but no one has reacted yet, and this is even more suspicious. With all this, he looks at his girlfriend and realizes that her instincts are clearly sensing something. The main character decides to continue crumbling everything around, waiting for the moment when the stranger deigns to show up. At some point, someone attacks the bait zombie from behind, piercing its head with a huge kitchen knife. The zombie attacker turns out to be a surviving guy with yellow hair who shouts that he knows about the presence of our heroes and asks them to come out of hiding. Encouraged, Edward crawls out from behind the bar asking how he can contact him. The mysterious guy decides not to engage in dialogue with our heroes and immediately begins to get into a fight. Attacking Edward, the stranger manages to pull out a red ball from his jacket pocket and throw it towards the main character, but he manages to cut it in flight. Having cut the ball, its contents fall into the eyes and nostrils of our protagonist, causing him to cough and cry. Taking advantage of the moment of confusion, the stranger wastes no time getting ready to finish off our main character. Shanna manages to stop him, knocking the weapon out of his hands and threatening him with her katana. Meanwhile, Edward, trying to rub his eyes and see at least something, orders the girl not to kill him. The unfamiliar guy exhales. I'm glad that he'll stay alive because I thought that he had just a few seconds left. His joy is immediately interrupted by a sharp kick in the back, causing him to fall to the ground and begin to groan in pain. An enraged Shauna explains her actions by saying that she was ordered not to kill him, but no one forbade him to beat him. The girl takes the stranger by the collar, giving the stranger several slaps in the face and warning him not to make sudden movements. Meanwhile, Bella takes a rag and a bottle of water from her supplies and tries to wash out our protagonist's eyes. Having regained the ability to contemplate the world around him, Edward notices the weapon with which the stranger tried to hit him. He realizes that he is holding in his hands a sharpened file, covered in zombie blood and scratches that are enough to kill any survivor. A yellow-haired guy standing in the corner with a dissatisfied look asks what they are going to do with him and what they want. He tries to justify himself by saying that he simply wanted to escape from the bandits, for whom he mistook our main characters. Edward points out that the stranger is too familiar with the surroundings, therefore he lives here. He also notices that the guy is trying to divert their attention from something important that he is trying to protect. The main character notices that the guy is starting to get nervous and tries to explain that he has nothing but a handful of supplies, and he himself is starving here. The protagonist, with a menacing look, orders him to answer the question. If he does not want to give up his life, is there anyone here besides him? Plucking up courage, the guy replies that they can do whatever they want with him and his life is in his hands. Edward decides to let him go. They say that if he doesn't want to confess, he will have to search every corner here himself. He orders Bella to hold this guy tightly and comb the entire building with him. I make my way deeper into the building and inspect each room, carefully watching the reaction of the guy who attacked them, trying to see fears. At some point, they get to the utility room. Edward immediately notices that the guy has looked away, so that's where he's hiding something. The stranger tries to stop him, but the main character still knocks down the door into the room and sees in front of him a huge number of boxes and a refrigerator standing near the wall. The yellow-haired guy admits that this is his warehouse, and since he was able to find it, let him take whatever he wants. Edward senses that this is not all that the stranger who attacked them was trying to hide, and decides to move the refrigerator to the side, revealing another door behind it. He immediately decides to check what is inside the next room, but before he can pull the handle, someone jumps out at him. A mysterious silhouette with a knife immediately rushes towards the main character with obvious unfriendly intentions. At the last moment, Edward manages to use his spiritual power and dodge the knife attack. A girl in a school uniform with a red bow on her hair immediately comes out from behind the door and asks to let her friend Billy go. Having almost lost his life, Edward understands that even the slightest mistake can cost him everything, and is very glad that his abilities were able to slightly shake the mind of this girl. The mysterious stranger wastes no time trying to once again attack our protagonist, screaming to let her friend go. Edward notices that she is moving too slowly and it costs him nothing to dodge the attack. But at the last moment, the dagger suddenly accelerates. A moment before the strike, he again manages to use his abilities and shake the minds of the attacking girls, which gives him the opportunity to return. The main character assumes that the girl is seriously ill, but in any case, the speed of her reaction at key moments of the fight is amazing, and perhaps she has some kind of ability. He also notices that Bella has been acting strangely for quite a long period of time, and apparently she felt her presence. Edward decides not to waste time and think about everything that is happening a little later, but now he needs to disarm and capture this girl. Billy, watching from the sidelines, immediately begins to scream and demand to let his girlfriend go. The main character grabs a defenseless girl, threatening her with the same weapon smeared with zombie blood. At the same moment, their conversation is interrupted by Shanna, who grabs her head and tries to say that she remembered something. She says that in films such as Edward are called villains, which causes a less happy reaction on his face. Billy, meanwhile, starts screaming again, saying that no man would bully a little girl. The main character explains that she was the first to get into a fight, and he was simply defending himself. When Edward asks why the two of them attacked them, the girl explains that she just wanted to save her friend. The girl offers to apologize for both of them, saying that Billy has already received enough for his impudence. The guy again intervenes in the conversation, ordering him to let his girlfriend go and don't dare touch her. The girl tries to calm him down by saying that in any case, they will not be able to cope with him, and besides, she is clearly not his type. The protagonist lets go of the girl and carefully sits her down near the wall, giving her the opportunity to clear her throat and come to her senses. After which he leans towards her and says that he is 100% sure, and that she has superpowers, causing surprise in the girl herself. She also explains that during their fight, it seemed to her that he was also using some kind of force. The girl once again apologizes for her friend, saying that he is sometimes too hot-tempered and can overdo it, explaining this by saying that he would then act to protect himself and me and asks to let him go. Edward understands the situation perfectly well, but she is beyond interested in him much more than relationships. The girl explains that her ability allows her to speed up herself and her reactions, as if slowing down time. The main character praises her for her honesty, hearing in response that in any case, they are his hostages, and there is no point in lying. Looking at her, he realizes that in their duet she is the main one, and if she were healthy, she would be much stronger and would not be stuck here. Having finished the showdown, Edward decides to look around and study their shelter in more detail. Sitting down to rest for a while, he explains that because of the pepper bomb, they will have to stay here for a while and also discuss compensation for the damage caused. The girl points to them and says that they have already beaten him more than once and that they want more. She also points out one of Edward's companions, saying that she seems very familiar to her and suggests that she studied at the city's university. Looking at Bilo, she explains that she was the main beauty of the university, and he was very lucky to have her. After which the girl decides to introduce herself. They say that her name is Nikki, and she is a first-year student in the English language department, and Billy studied in the physical education department. Nike also asks not to be angry with his friend, saying that he is a very good guy, just a little nervous. Analyzing everything that happens, the protagonist understands that these two had problems because of unfriendly survivors. Looking at him, he understands that the current state of affairs does not allow him to be truly calm, and every day he has to put up with new dangers. Nikki also decides that the student is how they ended up here in the first place, assuming that, like them, they ran away from the campus. Edward replies that on the contrary, their path lies precisely in the direction of the campus, which causes a real shock among their new acquaintances. Billy starts screaming again, saying that the three of them have gone crazy because he and Nikki barely made it out of there alive. The girl is trying to explain to the main character that it will be easier to go to the suburbs and find some kind of shelter there with food supplies and wait for help from the government. Edward understands that Nikki is a very smart girl and if Bella and Shauna weren't with him, perhaps he would have done just that. He explains that he needs to do something there and asks to share information with him since they were there. Billy enthusiastically reports that Edward is lucky because his girlfriend was the main savior of the university team, and she knows the situation on campus well. The main character understands that although Billy is a good fighter, he is not very smart because he literally gave himself away. Nikki explains that she was not exactly a rescue team, just a few students and teachers huddled together. Edward agrees that the university is not small at all, and it is not surprising that there are similar associations there. The girl informs that initially there were 55,000 people there, and at the moment there are at least 3,000 survivors there against a huge crowd of infected. Having heard such numbers, Edward decides not to show his joy, hoping that there will be a huge number of mutants there. Nike also adds that all 3,000 survivors do not have a common command and are divided into small groups throughout the town. She also adds that in the largest team of more than 200 people, there are very few supplies there, so most are planning to escape from there. There were more than 30 people on her team, but in the end only 10 made it out, and in the end it was just the two of them. Reflecting on the further plan of action, Edward is upset that due to Nikki's health, he will not be able to show them the way. Billy again begins to object, saying that he is crazy because she is already weak and does not have to obey his every whim. The girl immediately shuts up her best friend by saying that she herself has the right to decide what to do. The guy tries to justify himself by saying that he and Nikki are one team and he is trying his best to take care of her and protect her. Edward immediately objects to such a statement, asking why he locked her in such a place and watched her slowly die. Nikki immediately orders his friend to shut up if he doesn't want to get beaten up again. Billy falls silent and quietly grinds his teeth, thinking to himself who this guy even is that has the right to shout at him. The main character says that he doesn't want to cause her problems and asks her to just draw him a map and they will be even. Nikki immediately counters with confidence and a straight face, saying that she will go with them. Looking at the trio of our heroes, she claims that she will find the strength and courage to accompany them to the campus. Her friend immediately tries to object, trying to dissuade her from such a reckless idea, explaining that it is too dangerous there and it is not worth going there. Nikki explains that the days go by and she only gets worse, and she doesn't want to die. She certainly doesn't have an illness. The girl claims that she will not become ballast and that he will help her along the way, but on the condition that he can take them to the university hospital. When Edward asks why she should go to the hospital, they will return to their rescue team. She simply smiles sweetly. The girl explains that she just wants to find some medicine in the hospital because it's better than just waiting for death. The main character understands that this arrangement is much better than going at random according to a map or information received orally. Looking at Billy, he understands that the two of them definitely won't get there, and if he were in their place, he would have done the same thing. Edward admits that this girl is very smart and knows how to make an equal exchange. These are the kind of people who fit perfectly into the world of the apocalypse. The protagonist immediately decides to set several conditions, saying that if through their fault they find themselves in danger, then his team will be a priority. Nikki asks to look at her and answer honestly whether, in his opinion, she can cause trouble. Standing next to him, Billy also agrees that everything along the way should go smoothly without any visible incidents. Edward says that it is too late to set off today, and he planned to find shelter to wait out the night. The girl invites them all to stay here because it's safe here and zombies don't come here, to which the main character happily agrees. Nikki also decides to find out how many people with superpowers exist, according to Edward. He thinks, remembering that so far he has only met Anna and Nikki herself, and each of them is useful in their own way. Shaking his head from side to side, he says that, in his opinion, there are not so many of them, and they are very rarely the exception. The girl adds that as far as she knows, there is only one other person at the university with super abilities, but he is bad and it is better not to meet him. Edward also decides to clarify how exactly the girl received her ability in return, and she has had it since birth. Pondering the information received, the main character comes to the conclusion that his super ability is still a mystery because he still has very little information. Having finished the conversation, the main character says that they will look for another room and they will be allowed here. Billy already wants to object to why he is trying to be alone, but Nikki immediately stops him and asks him not to stick his nose where it shouldn't. Finally, Edward looks at his new acquaintances, rejoicing that they are very good people, and agreed to help him, after which he, accompanied by the girls, leaves the hidden room and goes in search of the room. Nikki is glad that their new acquaintance behaved quite well with her, although it is unlikely that she would have been able to do anything if he had begun to threaten her. She also says that Billy may hate him, but he must understand that his strength clearly puts him a step above them. Meanwhile, in Edward's room, Belle and Sean are looking at a green glass bottle with childish delight. Shanna picks up the bottle and says that she remembers that if she drinks its contents, she will feel good. The girl uncorks the bottle and begins to absorb its contents at incredible speed. After which Shanna decides not to be alone and let Bella taste the contents of the bottle. Edward tries to stop her, telling her not to teach her bad things, but the girl is already starting to pour the contents directly into Bella's mouth. The main character grabs his face, saying that his dear girlfriend was desecrated by such a terrible act. After which he raises his head, says that he has a bad feeling, and sees how his companions are beaten and very drunk. A slight blush can be seen on the girls' faces, and their eyes are filled with excitement and the desire to do something crazy. The girls grab our main character by the hands, causing him to have a panic attack and not understand what they want to do with him. Shanna eagerly licks her lips, slowly bringing them to Edward's neck, who asks her to stop and not dare to do this. At the last moment, he manages to push the girl away from his neck. They say that they agreed that she would not bite him. Shanna replies that she didn't mean to bite him, but just to lightly and tenderly kiss his neck. Alarmed, Edward says that the kiss is just an excuse, and he thinks that she actually wanted to bite him. Meanwhile, Bella also begins to pull her lips towards the protagonist's neck, forcing him to fight off two girls at once. At the last moment, our main character manages to take control of them using his spiritual powers. He suggests that alcohol awakens their instincts and their consumption should be kept to a minimum in the future. A moment later, the door to the room opens sharply and Billy comes in, shouting what is happening here. He notices Edward sitting on the sofa, hugging two beautiful, sweet girls. Billy immediately apologizes and abruptly closes the door, saying that he will no longer disturb them and asks for forgiveness. Standing outside the door, he silently envies, realizing that it wasn't even dark yet, and he couldn't imagine that they were so shameless. Meanwhile, Bella and Shauna stop pestering Edward, making him happy that the girls sober up as quickly as they get drunk. Looking at them, he decides to give them a good scolding, saying that they won't get another drop of alcohol. Edward says it's a shame there's someone at the door, otherwise they could have had a lot of fun without alcohol. Shans are interested in how they could have fun in return, receiving that they could play a very interesting game. After which Edward puts his hand on the girl's head, gently stroking her and saying that she will learn about this game next time. The three of them go to bed, realizing that they need to have a good rest and get up early tomorrow and hit the road. The next morning, they knock on the door trying to wake up our heroes, while at the same time eavesdropping and trying to understand what dirty things they are doing there. Suddenly, the door of the room opens and a dissatisfied Shanna looks at him with a threatening look. Billy understands that it's better not to anger her if he doesn't want to get hit in the face again and asks them to quickly get ready because it's already dawn. A formidable girl with a calm look, without a single muscle movement on her face, orders him to get out of here immediately. Meanwhile, inside the room, Edward says that he simply asked to be driven away, not to scare him half to death. At the same time, he tries to put boots on Bella's feet, asking her not to move around in one place. At the same time, Nikki looks into the room and asks Edward if he really loves Bella so much that he even dresses her himself. I understand that everyone has woken up a long time ago. The main character asks if they are all ready to hit the road. Having collected all their things, they begin to move towards the campus. Looking after him, Nikki wonders how great Edward's strength is if he is accompanied by such girls. After some time, our heroes find themselves very close to the campus. When Edward asks how long they have to go, Nikki replies that as soon as they leave this alley, they will run into a wall, which they will have to climb over to get inside. The girl also explains that this is how they managed to escape, and now it's probably the safest way to get inside. She also adds that in the dormitories, there will be the most zombies, and it is unlikely that anywhere on the territory, their number will be higher than there. Nikki asks not to worry because she is not lying to him and perfectly recognizes his strength, to which Edward grins. The girl also turns to Billy and asks him to give him his weapon, which originally belonged to her. The main character remembers that same bloody file, asking how much time it took to sharpen it like that. He throws it over himself towards the confused guy, who falls to the ground in the hope that he will be able to catch him. At that very second, Nikki, using her super abilities, manages to catch the weapon by the handle without allowing herself or her friend to get hurt. The guy looks at Edward menacingly, realizing that he did all this on purpose. The ranting of our heroes is interrupted by a bunch of zombies that suddenly appear from around the corner. Without thinking twice, the protagonist orders Bella and Shauna to deal with the crowd of infected as soon as possible. Looking at Edward, Nikki suggests that his abilities most likely allow him to influence the mind of his opponent, even if it is a zombie. In battle, any delay can be fatal, and coupled with the strength of his two companions, their team is practically invincible. Having dealt with the infected, they fought and looked at the bloody Shanna and fell into slight horror. Nike approaches our main character enthusiastically, saying that he has a very strong ability, and he in turn also praises her powers. He understands perfectly well that she is amazing, she has a strong ability, and she is not afraid of danger and is ready to fight her illness. After some time, our heroes get to the right place and Nikki points to the fence next to them. She also adds that to get inside you only have to climb over this wall. The girl says that, judging by the traces of blood on the wall, the zombies tore off someone's arm, and most likely he didn't last long, and the zombies ate his body. Don't waste time. Edward is already on top of the wall and asks everyone present to hurry up. Together with Bella, they climb over the wall in the blink of an eye and ask the others to follow them. Nikki smiles and asks if Shauna will go first, to which she says that she will cover them from behind. Billy immediately decides to help his friend by creating an impromptu springboard out of his hands. The girl jumps over the wall, but at the last moment she trips and begins to fall to the ground. Just before landing, Edward manages to catch her and holds the princess in his arms. Billy, who is keeping up with them, noticing this situation, immediately decides to attack the main character, asking what he allows himself. The girl asks her friend not to fool around, because they just picked her up so she wouldn't fall. Also, Shanna standing behind him expresses her dissatisfaction with his look and asks him not to do that. I warn you that if he looks at Edward like that again, she will hit him in the face like last time. Having climbed over the wall, our heroes begin to move deeper into the campus. The protagonist decides to ask how long they have to go through this park, and Nikki answers approximately 8 minutes. She says that this path is safer and there is no need to turn off anywhere, just go straight. You also add that when they ran away from here, they were chased by zombies. Perhaps they're still somewhere in the park, and they need to be careful. Shauna immediately looks back towards Nikki, asking her not to worry because if something happens, they will be able to stand up for themselves. The girl smiles sweetly, explaining that she was just warning me because it was her responsibility. Looking at their conversation, Edward smiles, realizing that Shauna's consciousness is being restored at a fairly rapid pace. His thoughts are interrupted by a zombie suddenly jumping out of the bushes and waiting for them in ambush. He quickly gets closer to Nikki, but she manages to use her super abilities. She grabs a utility blade from her pocket and plunges it straight into the chest of the attacking infected. At the last moment, it turns out that this blow was not enough, and the zombie is still alive. The enraged infected man manages to hit the girl with his right hand, causing her to fall to the ground. At that same second, the person standing nearby manages to throw her dagger and pierce the corpse eater's head with it. Concerned, Billy helps his friend get up, asking if she's okay, saying that they need to move on. The girl thanks for her salvation, hearing in response that this was part of their deal because they promised to protect her. Before moving on, the belly begins to scream furiously, pointing at the corpse of a zombie, claiming that it is their acquaintance. An angry Edward immediately manages to slap him in the face, ordering him to shut up and not shout to the whole neighborhood. He scolds the guy, asking why he allows himself to yell, not realizing that this will attract even more infected throughout the area. Nikki also agrees with Edward, saying that she already told him not to be so reckless. All that the Beat can do in this situation is to remain silent, remembering the words spoken to him before and bare his teeth looking at our main character. Looking at his back, he assumes that without the help of Bella and Shauna, Edward is nothing. Nike also remembers the zombie he killed, adding that his name was Chuan and he was part of their rescue team. At that moment, they were all panicked and simply ran away. And even after hearing him being bitten, no one dared to help him. Edward agrees, saying that they did the right thing because anyone who is bitten by a zombie will become a zombie themselves, and there was nothing they could do. Nikki looks to the sky, hoping that someday everything will return to normal, and the world will be the same as it was before the apocalypse. The protagonist is trying to change the topic because now it is better to deal with pressing problems than to dream about the future. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by another crowd of infected people emerging from the depths of the park. Edward decides not to hesitate there and then, rushing into battle saying that the rest of the zombies remain under their supervision. Billy doesn't understand what the rest of the phrase means when several more infected appear behind him. He turns around and begins to try to fight off the attackers, while simultaneously thinking about helping himself because there are too many of them. Meanwhile, the main character, accompanied by his girls, easily deals with the corpse eaters. Looking at him, Billy is filled with anger and misunderstanding why everything comes so easily to this gigolo. All this thinking about Edward doesn't help him concentrate enough to resist the attack. Meanwhile, our heroes manage to defeat most of the infected who attacked them. At this time, Nikki manages to help his useless friend in the battle. The girl also begins to scold him during the fight, reminding him that she has already ordered him more than once not to be distracted during the battle. She adds that Billy should not think about him because Edward's superpowers are what makes him so strong. The guy bares his teeth looking at our protagonist's back, dreaming that if he had the abilities, he would be much stronger. Having finished the battle, Edward asks Nika where they should move next, because simply standing on the street is not the best idea. He suggests going to the hospital because that's where his companion wanted to go. He also smiles sweetly and says that they are all on the same team and should help each other at the same time, thinking about the fact that there must be a huge number of mutants in the hospital. Nikki says that the hospital is located in the northern part of the town, and today they will not have time to get there, and it is better to find a place to stay for the night. The girl draws a plan of all the buildings on the ground and offers to go to the Taekwondo hall and wait there. Looking at her, Edward realizes that he was very lucky to find a good guide, because without Nika's help, he would have wandered around here like a blind kitten. Nikki suggests going left because in this way the path will be longer, but safer, and they will be able to avoid unnecessary battles. She also adds that if they go the other way, they will most likely stumble upon a monster living in the garden, through whose fault they have lost a huge number of people. Edward immediately decides to go towards this very monster, and the frightened Billy tries to dissuade him, explaining that they cannot cope with him. The main character explains that he is either waiting here or walking with us and does not say too much. Nikki immediately agrees with our protagonist because, in her opinion, it is he who commands the entire operation. Billy tries to dissuade his friend by reminding her of a mutated zombie that can easily kill her. The girl explains that Edward would not take risks just like that, and without his help, she would not have been able to get to the hospital and would have died in any case. Her friend agrees to go with them, thinking over a plan in his head that if something happens, he can save Nikki and get away from there. After some time, our handful of survivors find themselves near the very place where they were attacked by a mutant zombie in the past. Billy begins to worry too much about trying to protect Nikki with his body and asks her to stay as close as possible. Meanwhile, Edward notices that Bella and Shanna sense some kind of danger using their instincts. A moment later, a rumble begins to be heard nearby, and everything around shakes and trembles. The roar begins to intensify, and from around the corner, a huge mutated girl appears holding the corpse of a student in her hands. Nikki immediately decides to warn Edward, saying that apparently this zombie prefers handsome men. Seeing our main character, the zombie throws away the pipes he is holding in his hands, and with glowing eyes, he begins to move towards the protagonist. At this moment, Billy grins and says that apparently a new addition is planned to the harem of our main character. Hearing this, Bella and Shanna's face turns sharply red, and slight embarrassment begins to be read in their eyes. Both of them, without saying a word, but absolutely synchronously step on Edward's feet with their boots, causing him to scream sharply. Our main character immediately falls to the ground, not understanding what is happening and what is on his girls' minds now. Bella and Shanna look at Edward menacingly, and, with straight faces, ask him not to act like a jerk. Alarmed, Nikki asks what they are doing there, because behind them, there is already a mutant zombie very close. A colossal zombie girl rushes towards our heroes like a 40-ton tank rushing at full speed. At the same second, Bella and Shanna turned around and hit the attacker on the cheeks with all their might with their palms, after which, with incredible speed, they forcefully sent her flying into the sky. Everyone present, including our hero, finds themselves in complete shock as they watch the scene unfold before their eyes. In the blink of an eye, the zombie mutant is defeated, and Bella and Shanna only slightly straighten their hair. Edward orders one of the girls to take the crystals, but not to eat too many of them. Billy decides to express his surprise because it was not difficult for them to swat the mutated zombie like a bug. When Nika asks if they have met other mutated ones, Edward replies that this individual was not the strongest of those they had met. Billy, standing next to him, is in complete shock, realizing that it was the mutant who killed a bunch of their classmates, and they didn't even take a breath and dealt with her. Looking at the back of Edward and his girls, he realizes how great the difference in power is between him and Edward. Nikki notes, asking Edward that apparently they are not just lovers, but also loyal comrades. The main character agrees with this statement, realizing that it is very difficult to describe their relationship in words. Having gone further, our heroes still manage to get to the Taekwondo hall where they are going to spend the night. Nikki says that the room on the northern part of the second floor will be perfect for them because it has a good view of the street and is easy to leave if something happens. Edward is amazed at her knowledge, and the girl explains that her comrades told her about this place before the start of the apocalypse. Nike says that she is a weak girl and also sick, so she needs to make every effort to survive. The protagonist decides to cheer her up a little and expresses his hope for her high chances of getting better soon. Having reached that very room, they stand in front of the bloody doors deciding what to do next. Edward decides to listen to what is happening inside the room and realizes that someone's voices are coming from there. At this moment, the door suddenly opens and they are greeted by a gray-haired man wearing glasses who asks what faculty they are from. The man is noticed by Billy, who enthusiastically rejoices at their meeting, wondering why the professor is here. Also behind the professor, he sees a tall brunette whose name is Eric, and apparently they were friends at the university. The guys begin to rejoice at the meeting after a long break, and the professor finds himself upset by several more hungry mouths. Nikki invites everyone to go inside, and Edward agrees with her because at least he needs to look around. Eric asks his friend how he ended up here, and Billy replies that they fought their way out of the red light district. His friend immediately wonders how they were able to travel such a long way and how they managed to get out of the campus. Everyone present begins to enthusiastically question Billy and admire how they managed to do it. Also, all the survivors begin to discuss Bella and Shanna and why two such beautiful girls were accompanied by their friend. Eric immediately runs up to Edward, asking who he is and what faculty he is from, because apparently they have never met before. Looking at this main guy, the hero understands that they only fought off trouble, because as soon as they met, he immediately spilled all the information, and now it could happen again. In his opinion, he is only getting in the way while trying to pretend to be a hero, and apparently, it would be better to leave him here. He looks back at Nikki, deciding to discuss this with her since they are still on the same team. Edward raises his head in response to Eric's question that they are not from this university and were just passing by. The guy smiles and says that it doesn't matter where you are from, because they are all people and fate brought them together. Looking at our heroes, Eric understands that Billy is not very respected in the team, which means the leader is someone else. Looking at Shauna, he sees a girl with a determined look who, judging by his opinion, has already killed many with the help of her katana, after which he turns his gaze to Bella, realizing that the main beauty of the campus also turned out to be quite strong. Edward immediately intervenes in his thoughts with a menacing look, hinting that he should stop staring as soon as possible. Billy immediately approaches his friend and whispers in his ear that Edward and Bella are in a relationship. Eric immediately apologizes, says that he was not in the know and asks them to go and settle down and, if necessary, they can even give them a separate room. The protagonist takes Nikki and asks her to take them to another room where they can discuss further plans. Billy immediately rushes after them, asking them to wait and not leave without him. At the last moment, his friend Eric stops him and says that he wants to ask him something. He reassures Billy and asks him not to worry because his friends won't go far, and they haven't seen each other for too long, and it would be nice to remember the old days. Eric first decides to ask who Edward is, to which Billy replies that he cannot briefly describe who he is, realizing in his head that now is not the right time to reveal all his cards. Eric smiles and asks if his friend has any food with him that he can share with them. Billy replies that Edward has all the food and supplies, but since he doesn't like him, he doesn't even share it with him. He also explains that most likely they will not stay here for long, and after waiting out the night, they will move on. And after a short dialogue, Eric, with a menacing look, asks Billy to find an opportune moment and go outside because he will be waiting for him there. He calms him down by saying that they will just discuss something because they are old friends and everything will be fine. At the last moment, Eric grins, realizing that in the hands of our heroes, there is a whole backpack of food and even 3 excellent blades in addition. Returning to the room where all the survivors are, Eric immediately begins to ask how it all went and whether these strangers really came from the red light district. The girl with pink hair tries to act like a little kitten, saying that they need to ask to be taken out of here. Eric, in a fit of anger, abruptly closes the door and orders everyone present to stop whining. One of the survivors says that every time Eric goes out for supplies with someone, he always returns alone, and the food he brings is only enough for a couple of days. In his defense, he begins to scream and says that they want to blame him for the death of those people who went with him on reconnaissance, and without his help, they will end up in exactly the same way. He says that they have no right to talk to him like that because he risked his life for this food, and without his help, they would all have died long ago. Eric says that he doesn't believe that the trio came from the red light district because, apparently, Edward is just as weak as Billy. He suggests that their group is actually not as strong as it seems at first glance, and apparently they are planning to get out of here in the near future. One of the survivors shows his uncertainty with all his appearance. He wonders why, in this case, they lied to them. Eric screams and explains that all this was done to scare them because everyone saw his backpack and there was definitely a lot of stuff in there. He also focuses on the 3 blades that our heroes wield because they are all of excellent quality. He says that all they have now is a broom bat and a broken game console, and if they had weapons, they wouldn't have lost only people. Eric says that it's already evening and they are all exhausted. In addition, he has a sick girl with him, and it seems to him that they are unlikely to go anywhere today. He also asks whether, in their opinion, it is easier to take food from a living person or from a zombie. All the survivors begin to talk among themselves, discussing how they can take all the supplies from our heroes and what they will lose a little if they share with them. Looking at their conversations, Eric remembers that every time he went out for food, he took one of them with him as bait. And fortunately, none of these fools had the courage to compete with him. Looking at this handful of survivors, he understands that all people are extremely selfish, and until they themselves become victims, they will not protest and will support him. The girl with pink hair asks that if his guess is to be believed, then they are planning to escape from the town, and they have been trapped here all this time. She also notes that if they were able to get so much food inside the town, then how can he explain the fact that they have 3 blades, since they are forbidden to bring weapons inside? Eric tries not to split and makes an excuse by saying that they managed to smuggle them inside, especially since the ban is not so strict. Most of the survivors agree with him, arguing that everyone in the hostel has something forbidden and they don't really want to die of hunger. Eric thinks that our heroes have good weapons, and if his people get scared, it could ruin all his plans. He looks at the pink-haired girl who tried to catch him in a lie and decides that he needs more convincing arguments. He grabs her hand and drags her closer to him, as an even more terrible and cunning plan has matured in his head. Eric drags her closer to him, grabbing the bunnies and causing horror and misunderstanding in everyone present what he is doing. Eric says that if the case works out, then in addition to food, they will also receive 2 beauties, and she herself decided to choose the difficult path. After this phrase, he immediately tears her clothes, exposing part of her torso. After tearing her clothes, he throws them on the floor, intending to give orders to the other survivors. Eric says that he is well aware that none of those present have fought anyone, and now they will train their determination. He points his hand at the girl and notes that this cutie decided to sacrifice herself in order to increase their mood and morale. He also shouts menacingly that those who are cowardly can just quietly watch this in the corner. Meanwhile, a frightened and defenseless girl hides in a corner and asks not to do anything bad to her. Under the rumble of thunder and moonlight breaking through the window, a handful of survivors begin to slowly rape the poor girl. Eric turns towards the professor, addressing him and asking his opinion about this situation. The professor looks towards the frightened and sobbing girl who asks for help and salvation, after which he joins other survivors and continues to mock the poor girl.